Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Today we step past iron gates and into 5 graveyards where the quiet isn't empty, it listens. These are real accounts. Shadows that move without bodies, voices that whisper names they shouldn't know, and footsteps that follow when no one is there. This is a brand new channel and I'm aiming for 1,000 subscribers this month. If true horror is your thing, hit subscribe. It tells YouTube to push these stories to you, and it helps this channel. Survive, kill the lights, mute the world, let's begin. I didn't believe the stories about Oak Hill Cemetery until last October. If you're from my town, you probably know the hill even if you never went up there. The cemetery sits on a ridge of old oaks that overlook the river and the brick mills. And when the leaves fall, you can see white stones through the branches like crooked teeth. Kids tell each other about a lantern that drifts between the graves after dark, a pale light that moves the way a person walks. They say if you follow it into the older section, it will lead you somewhere you don't come back from. I used to laugh at that. Then my sister asked me to take her up there. It was a Thursday. I had been back in town for 2 months, living in my mother's spare room after a breakup that blew my life sideways. I was 31. Working odd jobs, trying not to make eye contact with people I knew from high school. My sister Emily is 5 years younger and never left. She works reception at the dental clinic and knows every street, every rumor. The third person in this story is Marco, my best friend since we were 12. Marco stayed too. He runs the produce truck in the summer and fixes small engines the rest of the year. He has that stubborn way of standing with his shoulders squared, like he can keep the town from changing by sheer force. The reason we went to Oak Hill wasn't to chase a ghost. It was because of a dog. Emily had been feeding a stray near the cemetery gates on her lunch breaks, and she told me the dog was limping and getting thinner. She wanted to take him to the vet before the first hard frost. I didn't want her going alone after dark, and Marco had a spotlight he used for the farm stand, so the plan was simple. We'd check the brush near the maintenance shed, coax the dog out with leftover beef jerky, and be home before 10. The sky had that cold, hollow look you get in late October. A ring of pale light hung where the sun had gone. The oaks were mostly bare, and wind ran through the branches with a dry whisper like people shuffling in church. The main gate was chained but not locked. The groundskeeper, a gray-haired man named Rusk, always left it loose so the volunteer patrol could do their rounds. We parked by the office and walked in. The gravel crunched under our boots, and our breath showed. I carried the jerky and a coil of nylon rope in case we needed a leash. Emily had a small first aid kit. Marco had the spotlight and a thermos of coffee that smelled like it had been on the burner all day. We called for the dog in low voices. The place looked normal in that way cemeteries do when you tell yourself there's nothing to be afraid of. Rows of headstones, some polished and new, some tilted and crusted with lichen. A few pinwheels still spinning on children's graves from the summer. The maintenance shed stood near the fence, a squat cinder block building with a rusted door and a padlock so big it looked theatrical. "Here, boy," Emily said softly. "It's okay." We checked behind the shed by the compost pile along the fence line where the grass grows up against chain link. Nothing. The night settled as we moved. A light went on in a window across the river, and I could hear the hum of the highway if I stood still. When we reached the older section on the rise, things felt different. The stones there were slate and marble, dated with years that started with 18. Half the names were unreadable. The ground was uneven where coffins had sank over a century and the dirt had dipped. The oaks were thicker too. You could smell damp leaves and faintly something like oil. We didn't notice the light at first. I saw it out of the corner of my eye and thought it was someone with a phone. It bobbed between 2 monuments, ducked behind a willow, then showed again, pale and steady, maybe 20 yards away. Marco turned his head and it slid out of sight. "You see that?" I asked. "Probably a candle at one of the graves," Marco said. But he took his hand off the spotlight trigger. "It's moving," Emily said. The 3 of us stood there in our coats and watched the space between the stones. The wind went still for a second. The light appeared again farther up the hill, not bright enough to glare, not dim enough to be a trick. It had a color to it I've never found the right word for, like frost catching headlights at the edge of your vision. It moved in a smooth line, a person's walking pace, and I swear it seemed to turn toward us as if noticing we were there. "Hey," Marco called, trying to sound casual. "We're looking for a dog." The light kept going. It passed the iron fence around the old family plot without stopping. It didn't swing the way a flashlight beam does. It glided, steady and sure, as if it were held out in front of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Emily's hand tightened on my sleeve. "It's going toward Potter's Field." Potter's Field is what they call the unmarked area where the poor and unknown were buried. In our town, it's a rectangle, beyond the oak roots where the grass grows thin and the ground never really freezes right. I knew that from Boy Scouts and from helping with cleanups after storms. People say the lantern goes there most nights, and that's why the patrol started for a while years back. 2 teenagers went missing one fall after chasing it. That part, I'd always filed under urban legend. Marco looked at me. "You want me to hit it with the spot?" he asked. I didn't. I can't explain that. Something in my chest said if we flooded it with white light, it would either vanish or turn on us. "Let's just walk a little closer," I said. "It could be someone messing around." We moved up the slope, careful of the dips. The leaves made soft sounds under our boots. The light always stayed ahead, never more than a short sprint away, never letting us catch up. It didn't jerk or jitter. If it was someone, they were good at gliding. The strange thing was how quiet everything got. No highway hum, no night insects. Even our breath seemed too loud. I kept catching whiffs of something like kerosene, that sharp, sweet smell that sticks in your sinuses. The light led us past the willow and through the gate of the family plot where the iron had rusted away from the hinge. I'm not proud to say, I stepped around a stone and nearly tripped on a low border with a name ground down to nothing. Marco cursed under his breath. Emily pointed. "There," she whispered. Beyond the last row of stones, the hill dipped toward a flat patch with no markers. The lantern moved to the center of that space and stopped. It hovered waist level over the grass like a firefly trapped in a jar. Emily took a step forward, jerky in her hand. "Wait," I said, and I didn't even know why until I heard it. The sound was so faint at first I thought it was wind under the fence. It was the sound of water somewhere underground, a hollow echo, and the grass in the flat patch was a different shade, like a place that stays damp too long. The lantern sat above that spot and made the air ripple. Something in my brain clicked a memory into place. When I was 8, there had been a small sinkhole near the paupers section, and my father told me the cemetery used to have a cistern. There, an old stone-walled well they covered when the municipal water lines went in. They never filled it with concrete. They laid a slab over it and buried it under turf because people thought that was good enough. "Don't step there," I said to Emily. "The ground's bad." She stopped. But the light moved a little closer to her, just a slow inches forward drift. If it was a prank, it was a cruel one. It felt like a hand held out to a dog. "Here, boy," Emily said again before she caught herself and looked embarrassed. She swallowed. "I know that's not a dog." Marco's thumb fell on the spotlight trigger. "I'm lighting it up," he said. "I don't like this." He squeezed and the spotlight sprayed a cone of harsh white across the grass. The lantern's pallor vanished in the glare and something else showed. At the edge of the bright circle stood a short pole I hadn't noticed. It was blackened and fused at the top like a stake hit by lightning. On the other side of the light, the ground looked wrong. Not a hole, a seam. A piece of stone the size of a tabletop cracked along one side, the crack just a couple inches wide. The kerosene smell came back so strong my eyes watered. "Back up," I said. "Now." We heard footsteps. Not ours. Not above ground. A dull thud, a dragging sound like something heavy being hauled along stone below our feet. It came from under that slab. The lantern flickered and slid directly over the crack. I reached for Emily and got her by the sleeve and pulled. Marco stepped back and his heel found a soft spot. He went down to one knee with a grunt. The spotlight flew sideways and skittered into the grass, shining up into the branches and making the whole world look like a stage. In that strange light, I saw the seam widen. Not by much. An inch. 2. I heard breath. I swear it was breath, not air. Breath. The kind you hear when somebody is standing behind you and doesn't want to be noticed. "Marco, get up," I said. He pushed off the ground and the soil caved a little where his hand had been. His face had gone the color of chalk. He stared at the crack. In the hard side light from the fallen beam, I saw water glint at the bottom of the seam, maybe 6 feet down. Something moved across that glint, fast and delicate, like a hand skimming a surface. The lantern sank just a hair, as if someone lowered it toward the opening. "Back," I said. "Back now." We moved as a group, small steps keeping our weight spread. The lantern stayed, not following. It hovered over that crack like a lure over dark water. When we were 15 feet away, the sounds from below got fainter, then stopped. A whisper rose from the grass. It might have been wind, it might have been words, I couldn't understand them. But Emily made a small shocked noise, and later in the car she said it sounded like her name said in my father's voice. And our fathers. "Been dead 7 years, we didn't run." Running felt like something that would give the ground permission to open. We got onto the path, onto the gravel, and the spell loosened the way it does after you walk out of a cold room and your skin starts to feel like your own again. When we turned, the lantern was not where we'd left it. It was 10 yards back and drifting along the path away from us, slow as someone keeping a pace you can follow. It went through the willow's curtain and down the slope toward the newer stones. It never looked back because it didn't need to. It knew we were watching. We used Marco's phone as a makeshift light to find the fallen spotlight and picked it up, hands shaking. I remember noticing a black smear on the metal housing. Later, under kitchen light, it looked like soot. Marco wanted to go straight to the car. Emily said we should check for the dog one more time near the gates. None of us wanted to pass the willow again, so we cut along the fence and came out by the office. There was a man standing under the flood lamp by the map. It was Rusk, the groundskeeper. He was wearing a canvas jacket and a knit cap and holding a thermos that matched Marco's because they hand those out at the hardware store every winter when you buy salt. His face looked carved out of the same stone he polished for Memorial Day. He watched us come down the lane. He didn't look surprised to see us. He nodded like he'd been waiting. "You didn't step out into the middle, did you?" he asked. Emily shook her head. I told him about the seam. He set his thermos down and rubbed the back of his neck. He glanced up toward the willow and the hill as if counting something invisible. "Supposed to be redoing that section in spring," he said. "Hasn't been right for years. They filled it a couple times with topsoil, but it keeps sinking. There's an old cistern under there from the caretaker's cottage that burned in '79. They say the floor collapsed in the fire, and 2 men went through. One came up, one didn't. The water's still down there, it's all bricked. Pretty in its way, bad place to be after frost and thaw." Marco asked about the lantern. He tried to sound like he didn't care about the answer. Rusk rolled his jaw. "We used to keep a real kerosene lantern in the shed," he said. "Before my time. The old man liked it better than flashlights. Said it cast honest light. When the cottage burned, folks said they could see that honest light walking the hill for a week, looking for the path. People get notions, they see a glow, they follow it. The ground out there has thin spots, you can see where I've staked it. Tread wrong and you'll learn how thin a place can be." He picked up his thermos. He looked past us, not at us, at the path we'd come down, and I knew then he wasn't just telling a story to scare us. He was marking a line. The part of himself that belongs to living people stops at the gravel. The part that belongs to that hill goes on up into the oaks. Some men get like that after too many winters doing the same job. We told him about the dog and he said he'd keep an eye out and leave food near the shed. Then he said, "Go home," the way a parent does when you've seen something adult and you're not old enough to understand it. When we looked back from the gate, the flood lamp by the map hummed, casting bugs' shadows on the metal, and beyond that the hill was black. No light. No movement. It was just a cemetery again. That should be where this ends. It isn't. 2 days later, on Saturday afternoon, Emily texted me a photo of the stray lying next to a headstone by the fence. She'd gotten close enough to tie a scarf around his neck as a makeshift leash, but he had slipped it and limped away. She wanted to try again that night because she was sure he slept under the willow's lower branches where they swept the ground. She asked me not to tell Mom because Mom would say this was foolishness when we had enough to worry about. I said I'd go. I asked Marco and he said no. He said he'd done his part and he had a carburetor apart on his workbench and he didn't intend to put it back together after midnight because we got the urge to play Scooby-Doo. We went at 9. We brought a bag of rotisserie chicken pulled off the bone and still warm, because the dog had looked at the beef jerky like it was a trick. We brought my headlamp and Emily's smaller flashlight. We left the car at the gate and walked in holding the chicken in a plastic container that kept fogging from the heat. I have a photo from that walk of Emily's breath coming out like smoke, and her hair in a wool cap and the plastic container in her hands. She looks like a person who believes she's doing a small good thing and that the world will respond in kind. At the willow we kneeled and called softly. The branches stirred as if something moved under them, but it could have been wind. We set the chicken down and backed up to give the dog space. I switched off my headlamp and held Emily's hand because it suddenly felt wrong not to. The darkness wasn't a simple darkness. It had layers. I could make out the path's ribbon by how the leaves lay differently there, and the open shape of the hill, and the pale rectangles of stones. The air smelled like cut grass and cold, and underneath that, the faint shadow of oil. It began as a line of light between the branches, thin as thread. It rose behind the willow's curtain, not from the ground, but at a height where a person would carry a lantern if a person were there. It came forward until the leaf fringes glowed, green-gray like sea glass. I felt muscles in my legs tighten in a way that would have made me run when I was a kid. I didn't run now. Neither did Emily. The light was soft. It made you want to lean into it. Emily squeezed my hand once, hard. "We're not following," she said like she'd practiced it. "We don't step off the path." The light drifted to the right, toward the old section. It was farther from us than it had been Thursday. It moved patiently like whoever held it knew we were wary and could wait us out. It reached the gate of the family plot and paused. The pause felt pointed. I could almost hear words, "This way." Emily made a hurt noise, and I knew without her saying it that she had heard our father's voice again. That steady baritone calling her by a nickname no one else used. I took a step backward. The gravel popped under my heel. The light tilted not toward us but toward the ground. As it lowered, the faint sound of water came again, like breath over a bottle's mouth. The kerosene smell thickened. "Please," Emily said, and I don't know if she was talking to the dog, to me, or to whatever watched us from the seam in the hill. We left the chicken. We walked backward down the path, one careful step at a time. The light stayed where it was. When we reached the office flood lamp, it went out. The click of its ballast hit the quiet like a door closing. We came back Sunday afternoon with a leash and a different plan. We'd set food in a crate near the gate and wait in the car. That worked. The dog came in the daylight, and we shut the crate door, and he didn't even bark. He had a piece of wire twisted around one back paw, so deep the fur had grown over it. Emily cried while the vet cut it free. He was gentle about it and said the dog would limp for a while, but he'd be fine. We named him Cedar because of the smell in the wool blanket we wrapped him in. I could end here if all you wanted was a story about a lantern that scared us and a stray dog that found a home, but I promised the truth. On Monday, Marco didn't answer my texts. I drove by his place after dinner. His car was out front, the hood up. The garage door stood open. The carburetor was still apart on a towel, and there was a pot of coffee turned off on the counter with grounds dried in the filter. His back door was locked. The spare key under the grill was undisturbed. I called again and left a joke about him holding a grudge. On Tuesday, the hardware store asked if anyone had seen him because he hadn't clocked in. By Wednesday morning, there was a deputy at his house and a neighbor peeking through her blinds. I told the deputy about Thursday night and the lantern. He didn't write that down. He wrote that I was the last person to see Marco for certain. They found his truck on Thursday in the small lot by the cemetery gate. The keys were in the cup holder. There were footprints on the gravel headed in, one set, size 12. the heel, worn on the right shoe which matched his boots. There were no footprints headed out. It had rained Wednesday evening. Any prints after that would have been soft around the edges. The deputy said we should not take it upon ourselves to search. There are hazards on that hill, he said. The ground is not stable in some areas. The town brought in 2 men with rods to probe for voids under the turf. They flagged places with fluorescent tape. I stood by the gate with Emily holding Cedar on a leash and watched the flags go in like tiny orange tulips. On Friday morning, Mr. Rusk found a black smear on the padlock of the maintenance shed. He said it looked like soot. He also found a shard of glass in the grass by the pauper's patch. He showed it to the deputy in a gloved hand. It was curved, like from a globe, and had a rib of metal attached with a tiny wheel for adjusting a wick, the kind I'd only seen in antique stores. There was a maker's stamp on the metal that looked like a sunburst. The deputy put it in a bag like he was performing for a camera, and maybe he was. They never said anything about it on the news. They never said much at all. They always say as little as they can. I went back Saturday afternoon alone. I told myself I'd watch from the gate until sunset and go home. I put Cedar in the back seat and cracked the window because he cries if I leave him now. I stood with my hands on the chain link and looked up at the hill. There were flags everywhere in the upper section, a whole garden of warnings. I didn't see any light. I told myself I should be grateful. I told myself maybe Marco had gone somewhere without telling anyone, that people do that even if you swear you know them. The problem with telling yourself things is that part of you always knows when you're lying. When the sun sank, the oaks became black paper cutouts. A car went by on the road below and threw a brief wash of brightness across the map sign. Something flickered up the hill. It wasn't the lantern. It was smaller, a shine on water. Then the lantern rose from behind the willow, like someone had stood up holding it after kneeling. It moved away from the willow into the flagged area and paused, as if to make sure I was looking. It lowered toward the ground and hovered there, long enough for me to count to 30, long enough for Cedar to whine high in his throat like a child, long enough for me to press my forehead to the cold metal of the gate and whisper Marco's name. Although I knew better than to say it loud, I didn't go in. If you think less of me for that, I can live with it. The hill can have what it's already taken. It doesn't need me to bring more. I watched the light for 10 minutes. It moved along the edge of the flagged space, never crossing a flag but always close, like a hand passing over a seam while you listen for a draft. Then it dimmed. It didn't go out. It just sank until it was the size of a coin dropped in deep water and the day finished draining away. Sometimes at night when the furnace kicks and the duct thumps, Cedar lifts his head and looks at the far corner of my room as if someone is standing there holding something that glows. I smell kerosene in places it shouldn't be, like on the cuffs of a coat I haven't worn since June. I dreamed last week that I was back at the hill, and there was frost on the grass, and every flag had burned down to a black thread, and the lantern moved with a limp the way Cedar did before the vet cut the wire free. In the dream, I took one step toward it, and the ground made a noise like paper tearing slowly. I don't have a moral. I have a warning that's too small and too late. If you live in a town with an oak hill, any hill with stones, and oaks in a place where the poor lie in ground that doesn't hold shape, listen to the stories even when you don't want to. Some lights are for seeing by. Some are for luring. You can tell which is which by what they ask you to do. If the light asks you to step where the earth dips and the grass grows a different green, if it smells like fuel the way your grandfather's, she did, if it knows your name in a voice that belongs to someone who can't possibly be there, don't answer. The hill has all the time in the world. It can wait. And if it has taken someone you love, it will hold that fact very still, like a lantern cupped in 2 hands, and it will let you see it just long enough to make you take one more step. I grew up in a small Texas town where you learned pretty early that the old folks had their own way of telling you to keep out of trouble. They didn't ground you or yell much. They used stories like fences. "Don't swim at the quarry," they'd say, then tell you about the kid who slipped under and never came back up. "Don't walk the tracks." And there'd be a story about a drunk who tried to beat the midnight freight and lost. And for the cemetery on the east edge of town, The fence was a statue, a stone angel with a broken wing. "Don't go near the angel after dark," people would say. "It whispers." Some versions said it whispered your future. Others said it told you the thing you were most afraid of, the secret you tried to keep even from yourself. The end of every story was the same. You listened and you weren't the same afterward. I left at 18 for college and tried not to look back, the way a stray dog tries not to glance at a door it knows won't open. But last October I came home. My mom had slipped a few times and wasn't honest about it. She needed help. So I took a leave from work and stayed in her spare room, painted blue back when my dad was still around and my life made sense. It was a weird in-between month, still warm in the afternoons, cool at night, the smell of wood smoke starting to show up when people tested their heaters. On my second day back, I ran into Matt at the Sunoco. He'd been my best friend in high school, the kid who taught me to drive stick in his dad's truck and split Whataburger fries with me at midnight. He looked older, sure, but in a way that said he'd earned it. Lines around the mouth, a fuller beard, eyes that tracked everything. "No way," he said. "You're really back?" "For a bit," I told him. Mom heard the floor say hello the hard way. He laughed and clapped my shoulder, then lowered his voice. "You heard they cut back security at the cemetery? Kids been going out there again. They're saying the angel talks clearer than ever." I didn't say anything. I'd forgotten about the angel, or I'd pretended to. Matt read my silence and grinned. "Come on," he said. "Lena's back from Austin. Dom's still here, freelancing and wasting his talent. We could all grab dinner at Rudy's and catch up. After that, we could go listen." "You still doing dumb things to feel alive?" I asked. But my voice didn't sound as annoyed as it should have, and Matt heard the yes hiding in it. We did the dinner. It felt easy, almost too easy, like slipping into a jacket you thought you'd outgrown. Lena still had that dry way of looking at you that made you tell the truth. She'd gotten a job with a nonprofit in Austin and looked like she did yoga now, which was a funny contrast to the way she still drank Dr. Pepper like water. Dom had the restless hands of someone who'd taken apart too many electronics and put them back together better than factory, only to wonder if he could make the bits whisper something different the next time. He had a little parabolic mic he'd built into a backpack like a movie spy. "So the angel," he said between bites. "I've got a mic that picks up a whisper at 100 feet, and I got something else. Some code I wrote for noise profiling. If it's wind or animal or some kid messing around, we'll know. If it's a voice, different story." Lena rolled her eyes. "We're almost 30, she said. "Are we really about to go scare ourselves stupid because of a statue in a graveyard?" "You say scared like it's a bad thing," Matt said. I looked at Lena, and she looked back in that steady way. "You're going to be the voice of reason?" I asked. She sighed. "I'm going to be the person who reminds you that if any of us gets arrested, I'm not making calls to parents, and I have to be up tomorrow." So we went. The Angel Rest Cemetery doesn't have a dramatic arch or a fancy sign. It's a bit of fenced land with an oak line behind it and dirt roads that look hand-drawn. The older half is toward the back, where the grass grows in clumps and the stones lean like tired teeth. People bury their dead closer to the front now, where the city comes around twice a year and trims the weeds. The Angel's easy to find if you know where to look. You follow the dirt road to where it bends, then go off it a few paces into the old section past a clump of cedar. The statue is on a low square base. It stands maybe 6 feet tall. The left wing is cracked in a way that suggests it might shed feathers if it weren't stone. The face is soft, not the sharp Greek kind, more like a small-town artist copied a photo of a girl pretending to be an angel for a church play and did the best they could. The mouth is small. That's the part that sticks with people. The mouth looks almost too small to speak. We parked by the fence. The moon was thin, and the sky had that orange dome from town. Crickets, a distant dog, a big truck out on the highway. Dom slipped his backpack on like he was going to war. "Turn your phones on airplane," he said. "Less interference. If we get anything, I want it clean." Last time I was here, Matt said someone had left pennies on the base. Like the angel was a wishing fountain. That ever work? I asked. Matt grinned. Depends what you call working. We followed the path. The beanpole shadows of graves went past our calves as the angle shifted. When we reached the angel, all four of us stopped like we'd hit an invisible curb. That's the other thing. People always say the angel looks taller at night. It didn't grow, obviously, but it felt like it occupied more of the space, like the air around it had been tidied and stacked. Dom crouched and started unpacking. He set the small parabolic dish on a collapsible stand, a rat's nest of wire, coiled neatly beside it. He put on a pair of headphones that looked like they'd block out a gunshot, then dialed a knob. I stood beside Lena. She folded her arms and tucked her chin into her jacket. I could feel her tension in the way her shoulder edged toward me, like she wanted to bump and didn't want to ask. "You doing okay?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said. "I just remember being 13 and daring each other to touch the base, and then we'd sprint back to our bikes like something would reach up and grab our ankles. It's dumb, but my legs remember." Matt took a step closer than he needed to. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said to the statue. "Got any news for us?" "Don't," Lena said. It came out sharper than she meant. Dom held up a hand for silence. He listened, adjusted the dish, shifted it slightly. "Mostly insects," he said softly. "Crickets make a wall. There's some night birds, small mammals in the dry grass. If anything talks, it has to be inside that." We stood there for a long minute. The moon pulled a pale line on the angel's cheek. The tiny mouth didn't move. "That statue's older than the town charter," Matt said. "Earl, he's the groundskeeper sometimes. He told me it was donated by some widow in like 1912. Her daughter died of fever. The widow was kind of rich and kind of crazy. They say she sat out here every night for months. People heard her, talking to the statue like it was a real girl." "Earl tells stories," Lena said. "He also told you the water tower is haunted." "Earl tells the kind of stories that make you lock doors you were about to leave unlocked," Matt said. "There's a difference." Dom lifted one ear cup and pointed a quick flick. "There." The word wasn't theatrical. It wasn't a scream. It was like hearing someone say your name in a crowd and realizing their voice is right behind you. I didn't hear anything with my plain ears, just the insects and the low hum of town. But in Dom's face, eyebrows tilted, mouth slightly open. Something landed. "What is it?" I asked. He held up a finger. After a second, he lowered the headphones and let us each put them on, one by one. When it was my turn, the dish was pointed at the angel's face. Crickets. A small, dry hiss that might have been grass. And then, something under that, like a breath, got caught on its way to becoming a word. I wanted to take the headphones off. Instead, I leaned in because that's what people do when they think there's a secret just for them. At first, it felt like I was listening to the sound my own mouth makes when I sleep. Little catches, a click in the back of the throat. Then the shape changed. It didn't become loud. It became specific. The noise arranged itself around my attention like iron filings lining up on a magnet turned under the table. "Not yet," a voice said. It was quiet and dry and not male or female so much as the idea of a person. I flinched. "What?" I said, too loud. I ripped the headphones off and pressed them into Matt's hands. "You heard words?" he asked. "Maybe. I don't know." It said not yet. He put the headphones on his head, tilted them like a DJ, and waited. Lena didn't go near them. Dom watched the levels on a tiny screen, his thumb hovering over a button. "Say something again," Matt said to the statue. He sounded like he was trying to be charming and was a half step from begging. We waited. A minute later, he handed the headphones to Lena. She hesitated, then put them on like someone who knows they're going to touch the fence anyway and wants it over with. I watched her face. It made a slow change from skepticism to discomfort, to the kind of vulnerability I'd seen on her twice. Once when she told us her dad left, and once when she was drunk enough to say she thought she'd never feel safe, even when she was safe. She swallowed. A tear stood up and didn't fall. "What did it say?" I asked when she took them off. She shook her head. "It knows stuff it shouldn't. For a while, the voice didn't do more than that. A word here, 2 words there. It was like the statue never said anything to all 4 of us at once. It said a different thing to whoever wore the headphones. And it didn't repeat. That's what started to get under my skin. If this was a prank, some hidden speaker, some local messing with kids, it would cycle. It would rely on a small menu of creepy lines. This didn't. It fitted itself to you. We started visiting once a week. It sounds stupid now. I keep trying to explain it to myself like an addiction, because that makes it less strange. Like, we got a hit of weird and went back for more. But that's too easy. The truth is, some part of you wants your secrets found. Not confessed. Not judged, just found. It's like when the dentist tells you the thing that's been aching is a real cavity. Pain has a shape now. The angel did that with stuff you didn't even know was aching. Dom brought better gear. He bought a pair of headphones he said were used in studios, the kind where you can hear the scratch of a shirt. He set up small mics at different angles, and later told us he saw patterns in the spectrograms that didn't match wind or bugs. He tried to get the voice to repeat. It didn't. He tried asking questions. Sometimes it answered. Sometimes it made a sound like a laugh or a sigh. Sometimes it said things that didn't make sense at that moment and made too much sense a day later. On our second visit with the new gear, it told me where my mom kept the cash she didn't want me to know about, a balled-up sock in the back of the hall closet. That's private, sure, but it's also realistic, so you could say I remembered that sock from when I was a kid, and my brain worked it out and wanted to be impressed with itself. That's what I told myself. On the third visit, it told Lena that the man she was engaged to in Austin had a second phone. She didn't want to talk about it. 2 days later, she texted me a screenshot of a number she'd found on their phone. Bill that didn't belong to work or family. She didn't say anything else. On the 4th, it told Matt the exact time he'd be needed at his mom's the next day, down to the minute. He blew it off as coincidence until his mom slipped in the kitchen at 2:14 p.m. and called. When he got there, she said, "I tried to call you at 2:13, like she was apologizing for missing an appointment no one had set." Dom kept the recordings. He started staying up late to study them. He sent me audio files with labels like Whisper Angel 5:09 p.m. wave and Lena Responds Tearful Wave. He filtered, boosted, layered. It stopped being about whether the angel was real and started being about what the angel wanted. One night after midnight, we saw a flashlight bob through the stones and almost bolted before we recognized Earl. He's thin and has a mustache that looks like it was painted on by a nervous kid. He does odd jobs for the city when he feels like it. He stopped a good 10 feet from us and lifted his chin at the statue. "You're not the first," he said. "You won't be the last. The angel doesn't lie. That's the worst thing about it." "You're saying it's true?" Matt asked, almost gleeful, like he wanted permission to believe. "I'm saying nobody comes out here at night and leaves lighter." Earl's voice had the dry snap of kindling. "Some folks start hard drinking. Some start church. Some leave town. Had a boy once who set his own pickup on fire out by the oil road. He said he was trying to burn the words." "What did it tell you?" Lena asked. Earl looked down at his boots. "I don't like to repeat it. Telling it makes it grow. But it came true. That was the point." "Are we in danger?" I asked. "You were in danger before you came," he said. "The thing about knowing, there's no unknowing. You all go on home now, and if you can't, then at least don't lean in." After he left, we stood there with our breath fogging the air. His warning should have stuck. If this was a story with wise choices, that's where we'd have made one. But it's like when you stand too close to a cliff and tell yourself to be careful and then lean anyway, because you want to feel where the edge is. That's a human thing. Dom was the first one who couldn't step back. He started going alone. He didn't say so, but you could tell. He'd show up at coffee looking sanded down and smell faintly of cedar. He said the angel spoke clearer when there were fewer ears to share. He stopped letting us listen to the raw feeds. He started bringing a notebook like an old man at a hardware store, jotting things without letting us see. Lena found out more about her fiancé. It wasn't just a second phone. It was a second life. She packed and moved into her cousin's place and put the ring in a bowl by the sink like a car key she didn't need. She didn't cry in front of us. She said, "It saved me time," but her mouth was tight and her eyes had that raw look. Matt started pulling scratch-offs and lotto tickets in a way that wasn't a joke anymore. "It told me Tuesday," he said to me in my mom's driveway the day the first chill felt like it would stick. "It said Tuesday is the day. What does that mean? How many Tuesdays do I get?" I said something about how superstition is a way of giving yourself a timeline when life feels out of control. He nodded like he wasn't listening. "Tuesday," he said again, softer. "And me?" I started checking the closet sock for cash I didn't want to spend and listening to the house for the ways it was getting old. It wasn't just that the angel told me things. It was that now every quiet had the shape of a secret. The night everything really went wrong, Dom called at 10:30 and said, "It's talking full sentences now. You have to come." I said I was at my mom's, and she was asleep and I couldn't leave her alone. He said, "Leave your phone on. Put me on speaker. I want you to hear it. I need witnesses." He was breathing fast. The word that came to mind was eager, and then excited, and then something past excited that wasn't healthy. Put him on speaker and set the phone on the table and sat with the kitchen light off so I could hear better. The house ticked. The refrigerator sighed. Through the tiny speaker came the sound of night, crickets, a breeze scrubbing the mic, that dry hiss. Then Dom's voice, close and thready. "Okay, I'm here. Say something. Anything." Silence. And then, so faint I thought it was a trick of the connection, a whispery string of words like leaves skittering on concrete. The words resolved as they passed like a row of bulbs lighting one by one down a hallway. "You keep everything in the wrong boxes." Dom laughed, a sound that wasn't happy. "That's rich," he said. "Okay, what boxes?" "The wrong ones." "You think the truth is a knife. It's a key." Dom swallowed. In my mind's eye, I saw him leaning, headphones on, his small lamp making the stone face shine like wet bone. "What do you want?" he asked. He always asked that, like this was a transaction he could define if he framed it correctly. "You called. The angel's not what you think. It's a mouth for what's already in you." "Be more specific," Dom said. He sounded like a tech in a lab with a tricky instrument. There was a pause. I could hear my own heart in my ears. And then the voice said my name. Not just my name the way my father said it when he wanted me to carry a thing too heavy for one person. It said it soft, like a hand on the back of my neck. I picked up the phone. "I don't like this," I said. Dom didn't answer me. "Say it again," he told the statue. The voice did. It said my name and then something I had never told anyone. The small ugly truth I'd cut out of myself and thrown away like a splinter, and then pretended the hole had always been there. It talked about the time I'd wished my dad would leave, so I could stop holding my breath waiting for the next fight. It said it in a way that didn't accuse. It said it like a record of the weather. This is what the barometer read that day. The shame was immediate and sharp, and then something else came behind it. A wash of air like I could breathe easier because the thing was named. Dom said, "Yes. Yes. More." He sounded hungry. "Stop," I said. "Please stop." The voice ignored me. It told Dom a few things, soft and precise. One was about his brother he barely talked to. One was about a hard drive he thought was clean. One was about a lie he'd told when he was 11 that still tied his insides in a knot. He asked where to find something he'd lost. The voice told him, and he laughed a small, frightened laugh like a kid who understands what the belt means. He did not thank it. He did not run. He said, "What next?" Like a man who's been shown a map to a place he wasn't sure existed and wants to get moving before it disappears. My mom shuffled into the kitchen doorway then, her robe hiked, around her shoulders, hair flattened on one side. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. Her voice was thick with sleep and worry. I hung up on Dom without answering and helped her to the bathroom and back to bed. By the time I returned to the table, my phone had 3 texts from him. It's better in person. Bring Matt. Don't wait. I did wait. I sat in the dark and listened to my mom breathe. I told myself that if I held still long enough, the urge to go would pass. That's not how urges work. The next day, Matt called. He'd gone out there after Dom. He sounded like someone who'd been running in a circle for a long time and had decided to stop but didn't know how to slow down. It told me Tuesday again, he said. It said, "You spend your Tuesdays like coins." What does that even mean? I don't spend anything on Tuesdays. I work, I go see my mom. I go to HEB like a boring adult. Maybe it means you're wasting your time, I said. You don't need a statue to tell you that. I can tell you that for free. He laughed, a short bark. It told me something else, he said. It told me where my dad hid his letters. It said they're in the attic behind the duct. I thought my dad never wrote anything. You didn't go up there, did you? Not yet, he said. But I'm going to. Lena texted late, just a simple, "Can't sleep." I wrote back, "Me either," and we left it at that. 2 days later, Dom stopped answering calls. His gear sat in his apartment. The notebook was open on the table with 3 words written big across 2 pages. The mouth knows. No one answered. The door when we knocked, then pounded. The landlord let us in because he knew us and because our faces said please. We found Dom at the cemetery at dusk, sitting cross-legged on the ground in front of the angel like a kid in a classroom he'd made just for himself. He didn't look up when we came near. He was murmuring. It took me a second to realize he was repeating what the voice was saying, like he was a court reporter for something only he could hear. "Hey," I said, soft like I would talk to a dog, that's afraid and trying to look brave. "Buddy." He didn't blink. His eyes were glassy and bright. His mouth moved on its own, forming words that maybe weren't English until they were. I eased the headphones off his ears. He didn't resist. The sound from them was a faint wash of night, just noise. But if you held them to your ear, the noise wanted to shape itself. It was like staring at static until you saw a face. "We should go," Lena said low. "He needs sleep and food and a shower and to not be here." "No," Dom said. His voice sounded used up. "No, we're almost there. It's telling me where the seams are." Matt stood too close to the statue. "Seams of what?" he asked. Dom finally looked at us. He smiled in a way that didn't belong on his face. "Everything," he said. "It's all seamed up with words. You pull the right one and the whole thing opens." "Okay," Lena said. "You're scaring me." "Good," Dom said. And then he laughed. Not big, not theatrical, just a small private laugh like he'd made a joke only he got. He put the headphones back on without asking and leaned so close his breath fogged the stone mouth. "Don't lean in," Earl had said. "People always tell you the rule you'll break." I don't remember the exact order of the next minutes. I know the light went wrong. One of those October nights when the sunset smears and the shadows jump up at once. I know the crickets got louder, or my blood did. I know Matt stepped back and said, "Whoa," because the angel's face didn't move, but something in it looked different. Like the angle of its small mouth shifted a degree. I know Lena grabbed my sleeve. I know a wind came up that had the smell of water in it, even though the river was a mile away and hidden by trees. I know the whisper through Dom's headphones spilled out onto the air for a second like a radio. Caught a station it wasn't supposed to. "Say it," it breathed. "The truth isn't a punishment. Say it." Dom shook his head fast, then nodded, then shook it again. He was crying without the rest of his face changing. "I can't," he said. "I can't. If they're here, it's not for them. It's for you." "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." He pulled the headphones down to his neck and stood. He turned away from us, toward the old part of the cemetery, the thicker shadow under the trees. He took 3 steps like a sleepwalker. "Dom," I said. "Stop." He didn't. He started to run. I chased him. There's no heroism in that statement. I chased him because I didn't know what else to do, and because the idea of him running toward the dark part of anything made the inside of my chest go tight. I tripped on a low stone and skinned my palm and didn't feel it. He was faster than he looked when he sat still. He cut between markers like he knew them, which he did. He'd been there so much it was a second map in his head. He reached a single grave with a low iron fence around it and stopped so fast I almost plowed into his back. The plaque on the stone read, Eliza Marie, 1898-1912, which matched what Mattie had said about the widow. Dom put both hands on the fence and dropped his head. He made a sound that wasn't a word. The air around us went oddly simple, like the insects paused. Dom, I said again, and then softer. What did she tell? You? He didn't answer, but his lips moved and I realized he was counting. Not 1, 2, 3, he was counting names. It wasn't a list you say out loud at a party. It was the kind you keep to yourself so you know what you're responsible for. It was a litany and it sounded like guilt. Lena reached us, breathless. Matt came behind with his hands on his head like he'd lost something physical. The three of us stood around our friend in the twilight like mourners. I put my hand on Dom's shoulder. He flinched and then leaned into it with a weight that scared me because it meant he was still here. Say it, he whispered. I didn't know if he was talking to me, to himself, to the angel, to the air. A car slowed on the road in front of the cemetery and kept going. A siren started up somewhere across town and got quiet again. The world remembered itself. The moment loosened its teeth. We got Dom home. He slept like he'd been underwater and finally put his head up. The next day he called a therapist in, Lufkin, and made an appointment without our help. He said he was done with the angel. He said it got what it came for, which wasn't an answer, but felt like one. For a week, none of us went back. I walked by myself in the evenings because I couldn't sit still, and sometimes I'd end up by the cemetery fence without meaning to, then force my legs to keep going. My mom slipped again, just a small one, the edge of a rug, more scare than hurt. I found myself wanting to tell her everything. I didn't. I made her tea and moved the rug and set a little motion light in the hall. I checked the sock for the 100th time, like knowing where the cash was made us safer, which it didn't. Matt called me on a Tuesday. I checked the time without meaning to. He sounded calm. I read the letters, he said. What letters? The ones my dad hid. They were to me, unsent. He wrote them when I was a kid and never mailed them. He was trying to be better and didn't know how. What now? I asked. Because when the ghost in the machine is your parent, there's never a last page. I don't know. I might go to Houston. I found an address for his sister. Maybe he sent some to her too. I might finally talk to her. You don't have to go alone, I said. I know, he said. But I think I need to. Lena came over with a bag of HEB stuff and cooked in my mom's kitchen like a human, making normal smells in a house that needed them. We ate. She said she wasn't going back to Austin yet. She didn't say why. I didn't ask. She seemed lighter in small ways. A laugh at the right time, the way her shoulders dropped when the radio played an old song. If you expect me to say that's the end, I'm sorry. I wish it were. The town would like it to be. Earl would like it to be so he can go back to trimming weeds and telling teenagers they can't drink in there. But there's the thing about knowing. It doesn't go backward. 2 weeks later, maybe less, Lena and I were at the diner. She got a call from a number she didn't recognize and didn't answer. Whoever it was left a voicemail. She listened, and her face closed, not like a door slamming, more like someone put their hand on the door and held it gently while locking it. She stood up and said she had to go. I asked what it was. She said, just Tuesday, and smiled without her eyes. I've learned not to push when the ground's soft. I went back to the cemetery by myself that night. I parked by the fence with the radio off. I told myself I was doing a rational thing, taking control, not letting my brain turn the angel into a monster by hiding from it. That's a good story to tell yourself when you're doing something that scares you. The night was clear. The town glow was a lid on the sky. The angel stood the way it always did. No pennies on the base, no flowers. Someone had left a little plastic cross that lay on its side because it had no stand. I stood 5 feet away. That felt like a safe distance, which is hilarious now. I'm not putting the headphones on, I said. I'm not leaning in. I'm not asking you for anything. I don't know what I expected in response. Nothing, maybe. A rabbit rolling through the dry grass. A plane stitching a thin seam of sound above the dome of town. What I got was that same arrangement of noise into shape. It did not come from the statue like breath comes from a mouth. It came from the air around me. It came from my own ribs. You don't have to ask, it said. That's not how truth works. I took a step back and almost tripped on a flat stone. I don't want anything from you, I said. I wasn't sure if I was lying. If someone offers you the answer, you want it even if you swear you don't. That's better, the voice said. Wanting without asking is closer to what you are. Then what do you want? I asked. Because we can't help it, can we? We always put it in terms of transaction. Want is the wrong direction. There was a pause. I could hear the tiny click in my own throat. Then, it isn't a curse, it's a hinge. Doors should open. I stood there under the thin moon and felt small and angry. I don't want doors opened if the room on the other side is worse. You don't know how to live with silence. So you filled it. Filled it with what? With yourself. I'm done, I said out loud. I'm going home. It said my mother's name then, soft like a hand on a bruise. It told me something would happen to her in 4 days if I didn't move the table near the hallway and fix the loose leg. The difference between a whisper that knows your shame and a whisper that saves a life is nothing but timing. And I hate that. I went home. I fixed the leg on the table. 4 days later, my mom caught it with her hand instead of her hip and didn't fall. She didn't even notice she was safe, which is also a human thing. I did. I stood in the hall afterward and shook. I haven't gone back to the angel since. That's not a triumph. That's just a line I'm trying to hold. Dom's in therapy and doing the slow work. He still talks about seams sometimes, but now he says it like you might talk about stitches that will come out if the wound heals right. Matt went to Houston. He sent a photo of a porch step in the edge of an old mailbox and said, Tuesday. I don't know if that was a joke or an answer. Lena found a new place to live and changed her number and said she was done with men for a while, which means for now. Here's what I know and what I don't. I know the statue doesn't move and the mouth doesn't open and the stone doesn't warm under your hand. I know it says things that turn out to be true or already were. I know that hearing them changes you. You could call that insanity if it makes you feel better, like the story wraps up where the sidewalk breaks. But it isn't that simple. Oh, a lot of people in town are walking around with the weight of words they didn't want but can't put down. They drive slower. They call their mothers more. They avoid certain corners. They drink less or more. I see them at the grocery store, and we make eye contact and look away quick, like we glimpsed each other without clothes in the dairy aisle. The worst part isn't that the angel whispers secrets. It's that the secrets don't feel like they come from somewhere else. They feel like they're what the air would say if you made it talk. They feel like if you leaned close to anything long enough, your sink, your dog, your own pulse, you'd hear it tell you the name of the thing you're already carrying. Every now and then at night, when the house is quiet and the refrigerator does that little restart click, I hear a rise in the noise that isn't noise. It's probably the AC or a truck on the highway or my brain filing papers it didn't finish during the day. It's probably not a voice, but I lie there and wait for it to shape itself around me, and sometimes it does. It doesn't say much. It doesn't need to. It says my name or my mother's or the name of a street I should avoid tomorrow, and I fall asleep stupidly grateful and more afraid than I was before, because it isn't a curse and it isn't a gift. It's a hinge. If you come to my town and ask at the diner about the cemetery, someone will tell you. They'll point you east and say something like, if you feel lucky, go listen. That's not what they mean. They mean, if you can live, with the door open, go lean in. If you can't stay home, make tea, move the rug, fix the leg on the table. Pretend you don't hear the air at your ear trying to be a mouth. It might keep you sane, it might. Or it might only keep you from admitting you already aren't. Either way, if you go, don't take headphones. Don't take a microphone. Don't take a friend who thinks the world can be solved by making it cleaner to hear. Take cash for flowers and leave them without saying a word, then walk away. Don't check the time. Don't think about Tuesdays. Don't tell anyone what you didn't hear. Don't lean in. That last part matters, because once you do, the rest of your life, and I mean the part with coffee and dishes and your mother's hand on your wrist, will sound different. Even a whisper can be a wedge if you let it. And once something's wedged, you find yourself opening it further, just to see if it was always meant to be open. That's the kind of curiosity that makes people call things insane. That's the kind I have. That's why I'm telling you this. Because I can't unhear it. Because the angel wasn't telling me something from somewhere else. It was using my own breath. I'm not going back. I say that like a promise I can keep. Tonight I'm going to turn off the kitchen light and check the rug and run a finger along the fixed leg of the table to feel the solidness of the new screw. I'm going to tell my mom goodnight and stand in the hall until I hear her breathing, even out. I'm going to lie down and count cracks in the dark and make up names for the noises the house makes. If I hear anything like a word, I'll say it's the AC. I'll absolutely say it's the AC. And if I wake up with a word already in my mouth, I'll swallow it and make coffee and go on like we all do, like it's just another Tuesday I can spend however I want. If you think that sounds like denial, you're probably right. If you think it sounds like survival, you're probably right about that too. That's how it is here. That's the secret. The angel didn't tell me that. 1. I figured it out by myself, or at least that's what I'd like to believe. I didn't grow up thinking about unmarked graves. I knew our town had them because every town with any history does. But they were an idea, like an old rumor everybody nods through at potlucks. It didn't feel real until last fall when I took a seasonal job with the city's Parks and Public Works Department. They needed hands to clean the North Cemetery after a windstorm. My best friend Caleb signed on with me because he'd blown through his summer cash too fast, and my sister Rena tagged along on the second day because she hated the idea of us getting overtime without her. That's how we ended up in Potter's Field, the forgotten strip behind the nice headstones, where the grass thins out and the ground sinks in uneven patches, and most markers are just rocks someone shoved into the dirt 100 years ago. If you don't know what a Potter's Field is, it's where the county buried people without money, without names, without anyone to claim them. It's where the wind moves different. The weather had been on and off all week, the kind that leaves the dirt crusted on top and damp underneath. Mr. Keene, the groundskeeper, handed us rakes and a roll of bright orange flags. He's one of those men who look like they were born in a cap and work jacket. "Take the back row," he told us, and nodded toward the slope. "Stay out of the dips, ground soft, and if you see circles, leave them be." He said it like he was telling us where the first aid kit was. Circles. I thought he meant sinkholes. The back of the cemetery thinned into scrub, then broke open to a field of bare soil interrupted by tufts of stubborn grass and a few stunted mesquites that didn't belong in our part of the state. It's not pretty. Potter's Field never is. You can walk there and feel like you're trespassing in a place that isn't quite land anymore. The first hour was normal enough. We bagged branches, raked up bits of plastic wreaths blown off from the nice headstones up front, and set flags near places where the ground felt like it wanted to swallow your ankle. Rena worked with her hair tied up in a scarf, humming through her teeth. Caleb kept stopping to crack jokes about how we should be charging extra for haunted overtime. I kept my head down because if I looked up too often, the field messed with my depth perception. The humps and dips don't match what your eyes expect. We found the first circle just before lunch. It wasn't a sinkhole, it was footprints. At first I thought someone had been walking in a circle to tamp down a plot for a headstone, but there was no stake, no mark, no spot in the middle where tools had been set. Just a ring of depressions in the crusted dirt, close together like short steps, boot-sized but strange in a way I didn't immediately clock. Rena saw me staring and walked over. "That's weird," she said. "No in or out." She circled the perimeter without stepping on it, hands on her hips. It's like somebody started pacing and forgot how to stop. I crouched and traced one print with my gloved finger. The edges were so clean. You could count the tread lines. Caleb squinted at the circle, then at the field beyond. Prank, he decided. Some kids with time to kill and a pair of boots tied to a rope. He mimed swinging them around. It sounded possible for the 3 seconds he was doing it, and not at all possible after, because the prints weren't consistent like a stamp. Some hits were heavier. The spacing drifted and corrected, like a person turning and adjusting their weight. We marked it with a flag and kept going, because what else do you do? On the far side of the field we found another, and then a third. None of them had leading tracks. A few circles overlapped, and in those places the dirt was compressed, so hard it felt like baked clay. Rena swallowed her humming and didn't start again. When the lunch whistle blew from the truck, we were more than ready to move back to the part of the cemetery with names. I mentioned the circles to Mr. Keene while we ate. He chewed his sandwich and looked past me at the brown stretch of Potter's field. They're old, he said finally. Sometimes they show up when it's dry and the top soil crusts, sometimes after a rain. I don't bother them. Come on, Caleb said. Somebody had to make them. You got a homeless camp out there at night or what? Keene shook his head. I see people sometimes, visitors, folks who come through and leave flowers on the fence because they don't know where their people are under there. But I don't. See steps in and out, the circles just are. Old superintendent told me his old superintendent said they called it the turning, like a dog turning before it lies down, round and round. That's messed up, Rena said. You should put up a sign. What would it say? Keene asked. Don't look too long at the forgotten. We went back to work in the afternoon, but the field had changed in that illusion way fields do. Once you notice one circle, you see more. The sun shifted and the shallow depressions cast little shadows. There were dozens, maybe more. I had the nervous feeling you get when your eyes start finding faces in wood grain. We stuck close together and used all our flags. At one point, a woman in a blue church dress walked along the fence line, slow and careful, carrying a bundle wrapped in tissue paper. She stopped when she saw us, and I called out to see if she needed help. She shook her head and pressed her fingers to her lips like she was praying or asking for quiet. Then she leaned over the fence and set the bundle on a post, tied with twine. She never stepped into the field. When she left, she backed away, watching the dirt like it might lunge. That night I couldn't sleep. It was partly the heat, and partly the circles replaying in my head. When you close your eyes, you expect things to smooth out. Instead, I kept seeing boot prints marching around and around. Around 2 a.m, I got up to get water and found the hallway light on. Rena's door was open. She was standing barefoot in the living room, head tilted, eyes open too wide like she was trying to hear something. What are you doing? I asked. She didn't startle. She pointed at the balcony door. Do you hear it? She said. Listen. I listened. The night outside was still. Then, faintly, I heard it. Scuff, scuff, scuff. It had the rhythm of someone pacing on gritty concrete. Rena took one slow step back. Something's on the balcony, she said. I crossed the room and pulled back the curtain. No one there. Our building faces the parking lot. From where I stood, I could see the top of the carport and a sliver of the lot lit by an orange lamp. The balcony itself had the usual tracked-in dust from shoes, nothing more. But when I slid the door open, a smell rushed in like the first breath out of a cellar. Damp dirt, iron, a whisper of rot. Rena's face went gray. Close it, she said. I closed it and locked it, and we both laughed that laugh where the second half is a cough. Neither of us slept well after. The next day, we were back at the field. The circles from the day before looked slightly different, as if someone had walked them again, pressing down fresh. Our flags were still there, but a few had been angled inward, the plastic flapping like little hands pointing to the middle. Caleb borrowed a city tablet and took a video, narrating like he was a YouTuber. We're gonna bust this myth, he said. Come back tonight, see who's doing circles. He was trying to make it a joke because that's how he handles anything that feels too big to grab. We did come back that night. We didn't tell Keene because he would have told us no. And anyway, we were off the clock. We brought a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and a bag of chalk we took from the maintenance shed. It was the cheap playground kind that leaves dust on your fingers that smells like wet plaster. The stars were out, the part of town around the cemetery sleeps early. We hopped the fence at the back where it sags and walked to the flattest patch near a cluster of circles. The air sat heavy against my skin. I told myself it was humidity and didn't think about basements. Caleb wanted to do a test. He chalked a straight line to the edge of one circle and kept going another 15 feet. So when whoever comes in walks, they'll cross the chalk, he said. He made another line at a different angle. Rena stayed outside the circles and drew quick, little crosses at the center of each ring, a habit from our grandmother. Not a religious thing, she said when Caleb raised his eyebrows. A protection thing. It was quiet for a long time. We passed the thermos and told each other stories about the worst jobs we'd ever had to fill the space. A train horn blew miles away and the sound came through the ground. It must have been an hour before I heard the first step. You know how there's a difference between a sound being in the air and a sound being in the dirt. This was in the dirt. A weight, a shift, a tap. Rena squeezed my wrist so hard my fingers tingled. Caleb turned on the flashlight and aimed it low, sweeping over the ground like a cop on a TV show. Nothing at first. Then he kept going and the circle closest to us flashed with sudden shadow. I grabbed his wrist and pushed the beam back. For a second, the prints were just prints. Then one of them deepened, like a breath taken in reverse. "Someone's messing with us," Caleb whispered, but his voice shook. The sound built up the way a crowd builds on a sidewalk. Step, step. A drift of dust lifted and fell. The chalk line we drew across the nearest circle trembled. The flashlight made everything worse because it was like looking into a mirror and trying to see what's behind you. We watched the chalk line pucker in along a path of invisible feet. When the line crossed our circle, it broke in a neat track of boot treads that weren't there before and were there now, crisp and shallow. Rena made a small sound, not quite a word, and jerked her hand away from mine. Her face looked lit from below, though the flashlight was pointing down. I understood, in a way that bypassed thinking, that something was walking in circles in front of us without a body to go with it. We should have left. You would have, reading this later, with the comfort of your kitchen around you in the daylight, pressing at your windows. We didn't. Curiosity is a stronger glue than fear for people who haven't had fear stick to them before. Caleb, because he has always been the one who reaches out when the rest of us pull back, stepped closer to the circle. The sound of stepping sharpened. It wasn't a heavy step. This was the part that chilled me. It sounded tired. It sounded like habit. Caleb crouched, hand extended like he was going to feel heat from an oven door. "Don't go in," I said. He barely moved, but it was enough. His toe crossed the ring. The ground sank an inch around his foot. The flashlight snagged a bit of fresh chalk dust falling into the depression. Caleb's eyes flicked to mine. "Something's pulling," he said. Not loud, stunned. He tried to pull his foot back and didn't. I grabbed his arm and Rena grabbed the other. For a second, we made a ridiculous chain in a field of nothing much. The step sounds around the ring stuttered, like we'd interrupted a rhythm. Then they sped up. I felt the air pulse against my face. It was the strangest sensation, like a crowd shuffling closer, like many people turning at once, though there were no bodies to do it. "Lean back," I said. We did, and Caleb's foot came free. His shoe did not. The circle held it like a plaster mold. Rena swayed, and I thought she was going to faint. A line of dust swirled up and hit my cheek like grit on a windy day. The rhythm kept building. Around us in other circles, paces woke and joined, staggered but aligned on a beat my heart tried to match. "Go," Rena said. Her voice had a quality I've only heard a few times, like a thin wire pulled tight. We ran. We didn't look back until the fence, and when we climbed over, Caleb fell and skinned his palms and laughed in that terrible way people laugh when something has opened up inside their head and keeps going. We didn't stop moving until we hit the truck, and when the dome light came on, we saw that Caleb's sock was soaked in the same dark dirt smell from the balcony. His skin was cold through it. He didn't want to go to a hospital. What would he say? He said he was fine. He said he'd texted his cousin who works construction, and the cousin said sometimes topsoil can act like quicksand and grab a shoe. He said he was fine again, but by morning he wasn't talking like himself. He kept turning in place when he stood up from the couch, 3 quick circles before he'd walk to the kitchen, to the bathroom. He didn't seem to notice he was doing it. Rena watched him like a cat watches a door. I pretended not to see because pretending is easier for a little while. When I came home from a short shift that afternoon, I found a ring of fine footprints across the entryway rug. We don't wear shoes in the apartment. The prints weren't full. They were just enough pressure to whisper a tread pattern. They went around and around the coffee table. Caleb was asleep on the couch, his lips moving like he was counting. We tried to shake it off. People do when things don't fit. Rena cooked soup. We watched a sitcom too loud. Caleb fell asleep sitting up. He woke around midnight with a gasp I felt in my teeth. He looked at me and said, clear as anything, "They don't know which one they are." He didn't remember saying it in the morning. I didn't want to go back to the field, but that afternoon Mr. Keene asked me to help him check the flags. "The county is doing some mapping," he said. "They want to be sure where not to bring in equipment." He looked at me like he knew I'd been out there after hours. He didn't call me on it. We drove the battered cart to the back. More circles had appeared. That's not the right word. More circles had emerged. They were always there, I think. You just need the right conditions to see them. We stopped by the fence where the church lady had left her bundle. It was still there, damp and wilted. Inside the tissue were paper flowers made from old hymn book pages. Keene stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and told me that during the influenza years and a few bad winters after, they buried people fast. Families couldn't afford markers, records got lost. The field is a ledger with no names, just lines. "Why circles?" I asked. He didn't answer for a while. When he did, it was in a tone like he was dictating a note he never wanted to write down. "Some dying people walk," he said. "They get restless. My father did, near the end. Pacing from bed to window to door, round and round. Maybe if nobody writes your name, you keep walking so somebody notices. Maybe if you had a circle around your bed when you were sick, you make one around where you landed. I don't know. I'm a groundskeeper, not a preacher." That night, the balcony steps came back. Scuff, scuff, scuff. Rena and I stood in the dark listening to it. Caleb paced the hallway, turning a quick loop before entering any room. He didn't sleep at all. He started to look thinner in the face even though it had been a day. The circles under his eyes felt like a bad joke. The following morning, he called me from the parking lot. "Come down," he said. "I gotta show you something." I found him by the trunk of his car. The dust on the trunk's lid had a ring of prints on it, as if someone had been walking around the car in place, step after step after step. No tracks led away on the asphalt. From above, it would have looked like a halo. He rubbed the dust once, with his hand, and the tread marks blurred and then sharpened again like the dust remembered them. We went to the county records office because that felt like action. Ms. Patterson, a woman with precise hair and a way of speaking like every word, cost money, pulled a ledger older than both of us out of a cabinet that probably had its own registry number. She let us look at the section for the year the influenza swept through. The pages were thin and smelled like petrichor. The entries were brief. Male, unknown. Female, no name. Infant, unclaimed. Row 7, row 8, row 8 again. There was no map. "We get visitors sometimes," Ms. Patterson said, and in her voice I heard that thin wire like Rena's. "They leave little things on the fence. No one wants to step on someone to mourn them." On our way out, a man holding a stack of photocopies stopped us at the door. I recognized him from the afternoon before. He'd been walking the cemetery fence with his hat in his hands. He nodded to us like he knew we were in the club nobody wants to join. "Don't go in the circles," he said. "You'll forget where the edge is." I wanted to ask what he meant, but his eyes had the watery film of someone who'd been watching one thing too long. He walked past without waiting for me to speak. That night, everything came to a head. The sky built a storm that never broke. I felt electricity at the tips of my fingers. Rena went to a church thing that lasted late because she said sitting In a room full of people who believed in anything felt better than sitting with us listening. I stayed home with Caleb. Around midnight, he got up and started walking fast loops in the living room. Not anxious pacing. It was too even. I called his name and he blinked like he was waking up and said he was going to grab air. He stepped onto the balcony. I said his name again, but the rhythm had him. I followed him out and for the first time put my foot in the ring of dust his steps had made. It felt like standing on the edge of a moving walkway at the airport. The world under my heel urged me one way. There was nothing to trip you. It's not magic in some dramatic sense, it's that something in your inner ear wants to match. I lurched forward and put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. He's taller than me. He felt like a post. He turned his head fractionally. His eyes were wet and flat. They don't know which one they are, he said again. You get buried without a name, and when you stand up you keep walking until someone says it. Nobody is standing up, I said, but my voice sounded unsure. You're here. You're Caleb. Come inside. He resisted and then folded in like a tent. I half dragged him backward. Once he was over the track, his body lost the pull. He leaned against the doorframe and cried the way a grown man cries when he is exhausted down to the bone. We both slept. On the floor after that, the balcony door locked. The ring just visible in the gray light coming through the vertical blinds. Around 4, I woke to the sound again, but fainter, like something pacing in the next apartment over. We went back to work the next day because real life has a way of refusing to stop even when it should. Mr. Keene said little, only handed me a new roll of flags. He glanced at Caleb's bare ankle where his shoe should have been and looked away. There was ground settling last night, he said. Come mark what looks soft. We went. The field was a patchwork of our flags now. Bright plastic slashes against dull dirt. I found myself whispering sorry as we stuck them near places where the circles overlapped. As we worked, a low hum started in the distance, not mechanical, more like a few voices and then more. When I looked up, there were people along the fence. Not many, a handful at first, then a few more. They didn't talk to each other. They set things down on the posts. One man tied a handkerchief into a knot and hung it like a little flag. A kid placed a toy car. Someone taped a photo of a woman with a 1980s haircut to the wire. None of them came into the field. By afternoon, the county crew arrived with ground-penetrating equipment. They never got it off the truck. The first time the wind picked up, a wave of dust lifted across the field like something exhaling. The crew chief, a man with shoulders like a refrigerator, stood with his hand on the truck door and shook his head. We need ground truth before we drive, he said to Keene. I'm not getting my guys stuck. Keene didn't argue. He stared at the circles like a problem you can't solve because it changes when you touch it. We haven't done much since. The city put up a better fence. They installed a sign in the nice part of the cemetery that says the area behind is a historical burial ground and asks visitors to respect it. You can read between the lines. You won't find mention of circles. People don't like things that sound like folk stories in official places. But if you go there in the evening and the dirt is just right, you'll hear it. Step, step, a slow turning. The wind will carry the smell of a damp room that's never been opened. You will see rings where the surface has been pressed by many feet. You will not see steps leading in or out. Caleb is better mostly. He wears slip-ons because he left his shoe out there and never wanted to replace it for reasons he can't say without laughing. He doesn't walk loops around furniture anymore, at least not when he's awake. Sometimes I see a circle on the kitchen rug in very fine dust I don't remember tracking in. I sweep it and don't talk about it. Rena keeps a little tin cross in her pocket now, the kind you can worry between your fingers. She won't step in a circle drawn in chalk in a kid's game. The idea makes her sweat. Here's what I think, and I'm not saying you need to believe it. There are people whose names weren't said enough when they were living, and almost not at all after. They died scared or alone or angry or just tired, and their last days were marked by turning in small spaces. Nobody marked their resting spot with anything but a number that didn't make it to paper. When the conditions are right, the ground remembers them. Not them exactly, the pattern of them, the path of their feet when they were waiting for something that didn't come. The field shows you this. It doesn't try to hurt you. It doesn't try to help. It just keeps the record because nobody else did. I think stepping inside a circle isn't about superstition so much as participation. If you do it, your body wants to match, and something that has been practicing that pattern for longer than you've been alive is glad to have a partner for a while. It can pull you into its habit. Maybe if you're steady, you can step back out. Maybe if you're tired or if you've got your own unnamed things walking circles inside your chest, you forget which step is the edge. I think about the man at record saying, "Don't go in." You'll forget where the edge is and the way Caleb said what he said without knowing he was saying it. I'm not going back there at night again. I've told myself that a dozen times and I mean it. But last week our apartment complex had some work done and the crew left a square of dirt near the stairs after they planted a new shrub. The next morning there was a ring of little marks on it. Maybe a cat. Maybe wind that did a trick I don't know. I stood at the top of the stairs and watched the sun make shadows in the shallow depressions. Nobody else noticed. People stepped past like they always do. When I went down to check the mail, I built my path wide around that spot because my body knows more than my mouth sometimes. If you drive past our cemetery, you won't see anything but a field that looks like an afterthought. If you walk along the back fence, you'll see plastic flags and a few photos taped to wire. If you stand very still, you might feel an urge to take one slow step, and then another, small ones. Because big steps don't fit there. You can fight it, and you should. You should step back. You should say the names you know for the people you love. You should make sure they are written down somewhere, even if you have to tear a page out of a notebook and stick it to a fridge. I didn't tell you this to scare you. I wrote it down because I keep hearing the faint scrape in places it doesn't belong, parking lots and stairwells and patios and the strip of dirt by our mailbox. I wrote it down because if forgetting is what curses them, maybe remembering is the only thing we get to do. I wrote it down because last night when I thought I was asleep, I heard someone walking circles just outside my door. The sound went on for a while, a slow, soft tap in the hall, then faded like a radio station slipping out of range. This morning there was a thin ring in the dust in front of my welcome mat. I stood with my coffee and looked at it. There were no prints leading away. I don't know what that means, I just know I didn't step inside it when I left for work. I went the long way around. If you were me, I think you would have too. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't keep crystals in my glove box, and I don't think every cold spot means a dead relative stopped by to say hello. I moved back to my hometown because my mom's hips went bad and because a paycheck is a paycheck, even if it means cutting grass around headstones and fighting fire ants with a rusty spreader. That's how I ended up working nights at the Hillview Cemetery, a patch of fenced land on the edge of town, past the feed store and the old RV park where the Wi-Fi sign still flickers, even though nobody's paid the bill since 2019. We're a small Texas town with the sort of main street you can walk in 5 minutes. The cemetery sits low, just off a thin farm road that loses stripes as soon as it leaves the highway. On hot days, the air there smells like cedar and dust and that flat, chalky scent you get from old stones. It isn't spooky so much as it is tired, the kind of place that looks like it's been holding its breath for 100 years. I started the Hillview job in May. By July, I knew every row. I knew where the ground dipped, where the moles tunneled, where the teenage kids liked to leave beer cans because they thought a cemetery made them deep. My boss, Mr. Whitaker, is a quiet man who talks like he's making a toast you can't quite hear. He had me on afternoons, sometimes past sunset when it wasn't too brutal. Mornings and evenings, he told me once, tapping the brim of his faded hat. The dead don't mind when you mow, but the heat does. That first week of August, I switched to later hours. It was too hot to breathe until 9 o'clock anyway. I'd drag hoses, edge the paths, then lock up the copper tap by the spigot near the live oaks. The gate is a sliding chain link panel, with a dull wheel that squeals no matter how much grease you pump into it. I'd leave around 11. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in drunks with nothing to do and coyotes with mange. Locking the gate just feels like good sense. The first time I heard the shovels, it was a Thursday night a little after midnight. I was still inside because Mr. Whitaker had asked me to check the irrigation timer that keeps skipping zones. I had My flashlight under one arm, a wrench in my back pocket, and sweat in my eyes. The sound was faint at first, like someone knocking two pieces of wood together, and then it turned into something you don't mistake for anything else. Shovel biting dirt, handle groaning, something heavy being lifted and dropped. A man's breath, short and annoyed, the way you breathe when the work is hard and the work is yours. I killed the flashlight and I stood there in the dark beside the little brick pump house. The cicadas thrummed like wires in the air and a semi hummed out on the highway, but the shovel noise cut through the heat clean as a whistle. It came steady too. Metal into earth, the grit of sand, the grunt. I have dug my share of holes. I know that rhythm the way you know the click of your own car's door locks. Whoever was doing it was on the far side of the grounds near the older section with the smaller stones and the fenced family plots. No one is supposed to be inside after sunset. Nobody works nights. We haven't had a real grave digger in decades. Backhoes. Do the digging now, and when a burial comes up, the funeral home schedules the crew in daylight. I told myself it had to be kids. I told myself I should call the sheriff or at least Mr. Whitaker, but I didn't. That sound hooked into me. I started toward it, following the narrow path of crushed granite that snakes between the rows. The flashlight stayed off. My eyes adjusted, just enough to find the paler shapes of marble and the darker stripes of grass. The heat lay on my skin like a damp towel. Every few steps I stopped and listened. The noise didn't move. It came from a place. Not a random spot either. It was right over by the corner where the iron angel leans and the fence sags. I turned on my light when I hit the bend. The beam jumped over the stones and through big seamed shadows, and I had to swallow and tell myself out loud. It's a person, Caleb. That's me, I'm Caleb. 30, not married, the guy at family things who fixes your sink and changes your porch light and doesn't say much unless you ask direct. There was no one there. The shovel sound stopped with the light like it was shy. No footprints in the dust, no fresh pile of dirt. The ground was smooth and hard, baked by days of heat. I swung the beam wide, braced, and waited for a kid to pop up from the dark, laughing. Nothing. The angel's shadow did its long lean against the grass. I stayed for another 10 minutes, turning the light off, turning it on, hoping to catch someone, between frames. In the dark it started again, same 3-beat rhythm, same grunting effort, close enough I could have shouted, and then it would die the second I clicked the flashlight. After the third time, I was done. I locked the gate, got in my truck, drove home, and sat on the edge of my bathtub with my shirt stuck to my back and goosebumps on my arms even though the air conditioner was struggling its heart out. I told myself it was irrigation pipes. Told myself it was an armadillo and an overactive imagination. Then I didn't sleep. There's a diner on Main that opens at 5, and that's where I was at 6 the next morning, staring at eggs that tasted like the grill and trying to decide if I should say anything. My friend Jackie works the breakfast shift there. She's the kind of friend who knows when you lie and won't be mean about it unless you need her to be. "What's got you looking like you swallowed a battery?" she asked, topping off my coffee. "You ever hear anybody dig at Hillview after dark?" I said. "Like real digging?" She frowned at me the way you frown at a riddle you almost remember. "You mean like legend stuff?" "I mean like last night." Jackie lowered her voice. "Lenny Hargrove," she said, making a face like she didn't mean to say it. "My grandma used to tell me that when she couldn't get us to come in by dark." "Who's that?" "The old gravedigger. Before the backhoes. He died out there. This was, I don't know, early 80s. They say the trench collapsed on him. After that, they said you could hear him. My grandma swore she heard the shovel when she was a girl, but she swore about the boogeyman in the creek too." "I hate this town," I said, which is a thing we all say when we love it and wish it would stop being itself for 10 minutes. "What did they do after he died?" Jackie shrugged. "Hired a guy with a machine. You want me to ask my uncle? He knows every story. He was a volunteer out there for a while, helped Mr. Whitaker before his back went bad." "Don't," I said. "Not yet." I didn't want to give the town a story. I wanted to keep it in my head where I could still decide if it was real. I went back to Hillview early before the heat climbed well past reasonable. The place looked the same as always. If anything, it looked a little tidier, like a surface. Crust had settled in the night. I walked to the corner and crouched where I'd stood with my light. No prints, no holes. A single pale grub rolled away from the sun like a blind thing. At the caretaker shed, I found an old ledger on the shelf, pencil dates in a neat hand, names, plot numbers, notes like service at 2 p.m., and river stones added by family. The earliest pages were stiff and crumbling. The later ones were clean. I flipped to 1981 and found an entry written, darker than the rest, with a little smudge where a hand had leaned too long on a line. Leonard Hargrove, accident, see sheriff. No details, no bitter aside. Whoever wrote it didn't want to say more. After that, the handwriting changed and the notes shortened. A backhoe code appeared on the pages. The word depth stopped showing up. I didn't tell Mr. Whitaker that day. He's decent, steady, the kind of man you want running a place where people go to talk to stone. He has gray whiskers and a habit of closing his eyes before he says anything hard. I could hear him telling me it was pipes. I could see him checking the pump house like I did, tapping the PVC with a knuckle, nodding to himself even if he didn't believe it. I didn't want him to have to make it ordinary. Not yet. The second night, I asked Jackie to come sit with me. "You want me to hang out in a cemetery at midnight while you listen for ghosts," she said, "and you think this is a good date?" "It's not a date," I said. "It's a bad idea with a friend." "Sold," she said, and she met me by the gate with a thick hoodie and a bag of gas station peanuts. She brought a small digital voice recorder because she listens to those true crime shows and says, you need to have evidence if you're going to tell a weird story later. We sat on a bench by the live oaks and tried not to be idiots about it. The night was bigger than the first one, a wide, hot dome that pressed down on the dirt. Moths punched the air around the lamp by the gate. You could hear the highway more clearly, the long sigh of tires on summer asphalt. Jackie kept her knees, pulled tight, and watched the rows like she was waiting for a parade. "It always looks like this," I said. "Like it wants to rain, but it never does." "You always talk this much at work?" she said. The first shovel bite came 4 minutes after midnight, so loud we both flinched. It wasn't a tap or scrape like a raccoon in a trash can. It was a shovel breaking the skin of the earth. We stood without looking at each other and faced the older section. The sound followed that 3-beat rhythm again. Bite, step, lift. It took only a few strokes before you could hear breath with it. A short, rough pull through the nose and a push out the mouth. Jackie grabbed my sleeve so hard, the fabric creaked. I raised my hand for quiet, like that would help. Like the old gravedigger could hear us and we could scare him off. "Don't," Jackie whispered. "Let it go." I wanted to shine the light, but part of me didn't. Part of me wanted to hear it work all the way to nothing and leave us with a story that didn't belong to our eyes. The recorder sat in Jackie's lap with its tiny red dot blinking. The shovel kept time like a metronome. Then the light inside the pump house flicked on. Hadn't turned it on. We were 20 yards away. The door was closed, the windows are narrow. Still, the inside bloomed yellow like someone had hit the switch with a knuckle. The shoveling went on in the same place, unbothered by the light. My throat felt too small for air. I started walking without meaning to, and Jackie swore and came with me because that's who she is. We reached the pump house and leaned against the cinder block wall. I peeked at the switch through the window slit. It was down. The light, this is stupid but it's true, wasn't coming from the bulb. It looked like old lamplight, a kind that throws a shape around itself, heavy and gold. It puddled against the glass and made the dead bugs on the sill cast weird, sharp shadows. When I wrapped my fingers around the latch, the shoveling stopped. When I opened the door, the light died. The pump house smelled like wet iron and 3 summers of trapped air. I clicked the real switch up, and the real fluorescent tube buzzed awake and made the whole space look thin and green. Nothing moved. The timer box sat against the wall with its little plastic dial pointed in no particular direction. A spider the size of a quarter froze on the cement. A moth thumped itself against the tube and fell into my hair. "Okay," Jackie said softly. "Okay." When we stepped back out, the shovel began again. 1, 2, lift, like it restarted the moment we honored the rules. Jackie set the recorder on the concrete and faced me, If we get anything on that, I am making you buy me dinner, she said. Like steak, not a cheap burger. I don't eat steak, I said, because I can't help being myself even when I'm scared. Hurts my stomach. Fine, she said, then 2 steaks for me. We didn't use the flashlight that time. We sat on the bench and listened to that work. And I tried to picture the man who made that sound when he was alive. I pictured big hands and a narrow face and the kind of back that bends easy and straightens slowly. I pictured a canvas coat, even in the heat, because once you put one on for work, it feels like armor. I pictured him talking to the dirt like, you talk to a stubborn mule. At 12:28, it stopped. Not a fade, not a slow winding down, just a final lift and a quiet heavy set, and then everything was cicadas and a faraway semi again. We waited another 30 minutes. Nothing. When we walked to the corner again, the ground looked undisturbed, a smooth crust with a little powder on top. But when I knelt and pressed my palm flat to the earth, the dirt had a give to it that wasn't there before. Not soft exactly, just looser. Like a jar lid you already cracked with a spoon. I slid my hand over the space and found shallow grooves in 4 perfect rectangles. Not deep enough to catch the eye, but if you knew what you were feeling, you knew. 4 shovel marks like footprints. We took the recorder to Jackie's apartment and played it on her coffee table while her cat stared at us like we owed it rent. The audio was tinny, full of insects and the distant hiss of the road, but then clear as coins hitting water. The shovel came through. Bite, step, lift. You could count it. You could hear a man breathe. At one point, you could hear me whisper, "It's right there." And then the pump house door hissed against its swollen frame as I opened it and nothing. The shoveling dropped out like someone cut the wire. When we backed the audio up, we heard something else in the background, faint under the breaths. It sounded like rope tightening under weight, a little fiber squeak. We went back to Hillview at noon with the sun mean and high and everything honest. Mr. Whitaker watched us trot across the grass with our shoulders hunched and said, "Y'all, look like you found a snake." "Do you have records for the old plots?" I asked. "Like maps from before Lenny, before the backhoes?" "We have what we have," he said carefully, like people do when they're trying to steer you away from something. "If you're wanting to find someone, you just tell me the name." I told him I was curious. He gave me a long, steady look and then fetched a rolled survey from his office. It was yellowed to the color of tea. The lots were hand-drawn and numbered. In the corner, in faint pencil, someone had sketched a fence line that didn't exist anymore, wider than the current chain link by the width of a drainage ditch. Next to that line, someone had written 2 words I didn't understand. "Hallow set." "What's that mean?" Jackie asked him. Mr. Whitaker's eyes did that closing thing. "Old pastor used to say they bless the ground," he said. "Not the whole property. Just a part of it. They called it the hallowed set." "Yeah, I know, it's not standard. Later folks quit paying much mind to it. Town redid the fence after a storm took out the oak. We lost 8 feet along the west side to the county when they straightened the ditch. Nobody argued because nobody wants to argue with a flood. It's all the same dirt is what we said." "Is it?" I asked. "I've buried people in both," Mr. Whitaker said. I told the pastor that made us ecumenical. That night I ran string lines along the old map's boundaries. Jackie held stakes while I hammered them, and we paced off the distances like amateur surveyors with a bad plan. The west side of Hillview, the side with the older stones and the leaning angel, had lost a strip when the county fixed the ditch. The new fence sat inside the old boundary by exactly 8 feet. The line we set with string ran through several plots by inches, the way a wrong hem runs through a dress. At midnight, the shovel started dead center on that string. Bite, step, lift. It worked along the line as if a man was walking it, measuring with his foot, testing the ground. When Jackie stepped across the string to get closer, she tripped and hissed and grabbed my arm because the earth beneath her shoe had given like a pocket of air under carpet. She didn't sink, but the soil slumped and a thin trickle of sand rolled into the low spot. "Don't move," I said, catching her by the elbow. The shovel kept going. 3 beats, steady. I told myself if I turned on the light I would break whatever this was, and maybe that was the point. But then I thought about what Mr. Whitaker said about the fence and about the map. and about Lenny Hargrove dying in a trench that wasn't where it used to be. "Lenny," I said out loud, shocking myself. Can you stop a second?" You don't expect to hear an answer when you talk to air, but the shovel stopped. The quiet felt like a lid clamping down on a pot of boiling water. I swallowed. "We're listening," I said, and I felt stupid as soon as I said it, like I was talking to a stray dog who could recite poetry if only I was kind. The rope sound came then, louder than on the recording, a stretch, a whisper. Something underweight. I imagined wooden braces, canvas straps, the old way you lower a coffin by hand with 8 men and a pair of slatted boards. I pictured those ropes riding over their cleats, smarting under the friction. "Dodintu, you need it moved back?" Jackie asked beside me, voice thin. "Is that what you want?" The lamplight bloomed again inside the pump house, golden and wrong and warm in a place that's always cold. In its glow, the dust above the ground lifted and swirled like it had nowhere to settle. I got a sudden, clear picture in my head of men with hats in their hands standing at the old line while the preacher raised his voice against a summer sky. I pictured a circle drawn in words and belief, a boundary that didn't obey the county. "I think he's putting them back," I said. "I think when they moved the fence, they moved the edge of the blessing, and he's fixing it." "This is where you apologize for making fun of my crystals," Jackie said. I didn't answer. I was thinking about my brother's grave. My brother Matt died in 2009 on a curve you take too fast leaving town if you don't know where it tightens up. He was 18. I was 14. For years I couldn't remember the day without counting afterward. 10 years, 12, 15. Like it matters how long you've carried something if you can't put it down. After the funeral I went every week for a while, then less, then hardly ever. Coming back to town brought him back too. I found myself at his stone on Sundays, brushing dust off the carved letters with my fingers and counting the ants that crossed his name like they couldn't read. His plot sat near the west fence, 8 feet from a ditch I used to fish beer cans out of when I was a punk. According to the old map, the string line I had set that night ran through the corner of his grave by 2 inches. I felt the shovel more than heard it when it changed direction. It wasn't louder, but it was pointed a different way, and somehow that made my stomach hurt. I jogged down the path. Jackie came with me, cussing because she hates to run. The shovel worked on my brother's plot as if it had chosen it from a list. Bite, step, lift. A patient rhythm that didn't slow even when I yelled. I turned on the flashlight and the sound died like always. In the circle of light, the grass over Matt's grave looked untroubled, a standard green slab with a little split where the soil had settled years ago. "Don't," Jackie said quickly, grabbing my wrist as I raised the beam. "Turn it off." I did. The dark rushed back like a door closing. The shovel resumed. My throat closed up and the words I wanted to say came out as something ugly and small. "Please," I said. It sounded like a kid's prayer. The ground shifted then, a slow breath outward, and the air picked up the smell of damp earth from somewhere lower than we were. My ears popped like I'd changed altitude. The rope noise buzzed under the shovel, like it was vibrating against wood. I stepped sideways onto the string line and the soil dropped half an inch under my heel. Not a collapse, just a surrender, like someone beneath had exhaled. "Is he taking him?" Jackie whispered. "No," I said, though I didn't know, and then from the dark another sound joined the shovel, a short drag like a heavy box sliding an inch. It came from the left toward the fence, as if something long and rectangular had shifted inside the earth. That's when a voice spoke. It didn't come from the ground or the air. It came from the space my fear made in my head. It was the kind of voice you get from a man who's been outside his entire life, dry, low, patient. I don't remember the words exactly because our brains do that thing where they turn the literal into what we can stand, but it was something like, "Home is where the line is, son. You moved the line." I didn't tell Jackie what I heard until later. I don't know what she heard in that moment. Her hand found my elbow and squeezed, and we both stood there with our toes over the wrong boundary and our hearts beating hard enough to rock our chests. The shovel worked faster then, not frantic but purposeful. And the rope creaked under weight, and somewhere close by I swear I could hear men take a step in unison the way pallbearers do when the box has to lift and walk. "Okay," I said, because one of us had to say something. "Okay, we'll fix it." The shoveling stopped like a held breath released. The lamplight in the pump house flickered, pooled, went out. We spent the next day in town looking for a surveyor who didn't think we were insane. We didn't tell them why. We said Mr. Whitaker wanted a copy of the old boundary for record keeping. A guy named Travis Duggan, old ball cap, reflective sunglasses, held onto summer like it owed him, sat us down in his office and pulled a map off a dusty shelf like a magician. He showed us where the county had taken the strip along the ditch after the flood. He showed us a handwritten note from the church council that had once owned the property before it became municipal land. "Hallowed set," it said, just like our map. "Set by prayer and assembly on May 19th, 1939. You believe in that?" I asked him. "I believe in fence lines," Travis said. "I believe in people being mad when you move them. Towns have longer memories than people do. If you're asking me whether you should respect that old line, I'd say it's cheap to do and cheaper than arguing with 100 grandmas." I bought 4 rebar stakes at Murphy's and a roll of orange tape. We set them along the old boundary that afternoon. Jackie made little flags and scolded me for eyeballing the distances. We asked Mr. Whitaker if we could move the new mowing edge to that line, and he nodded without asking why, like he'd already decided he didn't want to know answers. We spent hours straightening the small stones near the string like we were tucking them in. That night at 12:15, nothing happened for 10 minutes, which felt worse than hearing the shovel. Then a new sound came from the far corner we hadn't touched. A wet clunk like a coffin settling against a sidewall. The shovel started there along a different stretch where the old map and the new fence disagreed by only a few inches. The rhythm was so steady I could have tapped my finger to it. In the dark, I felt something shift under the soles of my boots. A tiny settling that traveled through the dirt like a ripple. The rope noise came soft and then stronger, the way a sound gets close without moving. "I think he's finishing," Jackie said. "Finishing what?" I asked, but I knew. We stood until our legs shook. The shovel stopped at 12:49. The air cooled like somebody opened a door to a different season. The cicadas shrank back into the trees. We waited for the lamplight. None came. For a week, the cemetery felt ordinary again. We worked days, locked the gate at sunset, and I went home and slept through my alarm. I kept the rebar flags along the old line. If you drove by, you'd think we were marking a buried cable. The only people who asked were an elderly couple who put fresh silk roses on a grave twice a week. I told them we were checking drainage. The woman patted my arm and said, "You boys be careful of sinkholes," like we'd given her permission to worry about something real. Jackie cut together the audio from her recorder and sent it to me. Hearing it in my own kitchen in daylight weirded me more than the real thing. You can't explain away a file. A sound is a sound. I kept my phone's volume low when my mom knocked around the house. She already thinks the cemetery job is depressing. She doesn't need me handing her ghosts with her morning coffee. The 8th night after the shovel stopped, I woke to my phone buzzing like a hornet in a jar. Jackie's text. "You up? Go look." Then another. "Don't go alone if you can. Help it." Then, because she knows me, I'm already at the gate. I left my house wearing yesterday's shirt and a pair of mismatched socks. The sky hung heavy and starless. Warm wind pushed grit under my eyelids when I hit the curve by the grain silos. I pulled up next to Jackie's Honda and saw her standing on the gravel with her arms folded tight across her stomach, staring at the entrance. The chain-link gate was open, not just unlocked, slid wide like a mouth. "I locked it," I said. The padlock lay on the ground like a dropped coin. It wasn't broken. "Let's go," Jackie said. Her voice sounded sick. We walked in together. The gravel under our shoes sounded too loud. The live oaks rustled like they were warning each other. I kept waiting for the shovel to start, to tell me where the world had gone wrong. But all I could hear was the wind and our breathing. At the near end of the path, just inside the gate where there's a rectangle of bare earth where the grass never takes, a fresh mound stood 4 inches high. Not a grave, too small, but the kind of hump you see when you turn a spade full of soil and leave it. The dirt was black and damp and smelled like lost rain. Next to the mound, neat as a sentry, stood a stake like ours but not ours. An old piece of split cedar pounded deep with a sledge. A little flag of canvas tied to it with twine. The canvas hung limp in the breathless heat. There was writing on the canvas. I didn't want to read it. It took me 3 tries to make my eyes obey. The letters were done in a dark brown that could have been paint, could have been something else. The handwriting was careful, like you'd write a name on the back of a photograph if you wanted it to outlast the house. It said, Caleb M. Thorndate, pending Hillview. Hallow set my stomach flipped like a fish thrown in a bucket. I had that sick, animal impulse to run away from my own skin. Jackie put her hand against my chest to keep me from falling and then grabbed the stake with her other hand as if she could rip it out of the world. It didn't budge. The soil around it was packed like clay. It's a joke, she said, and even she didn't believe herself. Somebody, kids, this is some messed up. Jackie, I said, that's my middle initial. She stared at me in a way that made my face feel hot and far away at the same time. She knows me. She's seen my bills on the table and my name on a dozen forms. She knows what my middle initial is and that I hate it because my dad loved it. I'm going to take it out, I said, more to say something than because I thought I could. The shovel sound started then, not deep in the grounds, but right behind us at the gate. A single hard bite into the earth, and then another, and then another. It came fast, not the steady, patient rhythm we'd heard before, but a brisk, efficient chop like a man working to beat the dawn. Don't you dare, Jackie whispered. Not to me. Don't you dare. I put my hand on the stake and I felt it hum through the wood like a guitar string. The canvas flag snicked against the cedar like it was in a breeze that wasn't touching us. The lamplight, warm and wrong, spilled from the pump house again and threw our shadows long and strange across the path. The rope noise rose under the digging, underscored by that faint collective human sound you cannot mistake. The timed breath of men lifting weight together. Home is where the line is, the voice said in my head again, firm as a father telling you how the world works. Keep your feet. I looked down. My toes stood on our rebar line, right where we'd marked the old boundary. The stake with my name on it sat just inside the Hallow set. The shovel at the gate chopped once more, twice, and stopped. The wind pushed against my back like a hand. Okay, I said to the old air in my own fear. I hear you. I didn't rip the stake. I didn't run either. Jackie wiped her face with her sleeve and started to cuss in a quiet, practiced way. That made me love her like family. We stayed until the lamplight died and the insects started up again like an orchestra remembering the next song. When we finally tugged the gate shut, the padlock felt heavy in my hand. It clicked through the chain and bit down like it meant it. We told Mr. Whitaker in the morning. We showed him the stake because you can't keep a thing like that to yourself, and because I'm not interested in dying stupid. He looked at it for a long time and then sat on the low stone wall by the gate with his elbows on his knees. The old folks used to mark the Hallow set for the next keeper, he said without looking at us. When somebody helped them write, they wrote it down. Never saw it done with canvas. You ask me, that's older than canvas wants to be. But I've been wrong plenty. I'll make a call about the fence. County won't care if we mow the ditch side. Ditches don't vote. What about my name? I asked, too fast like a boy asking whether the shot will hurt. You're here, he said. That's the point. You keep your feet. It has been 3 weeks. The shovel hasn't sounded again the way it did those first nights, but every now and then I hear a single bite, metal and earth, deliberate like a check mark at the end of a line. The lamplight only bloomed once more, and that time it wasn't in the pump house, it was by the Angel. A low, warm circle that glowed out of nothing and went away like a sigh. The rebar flags still flap, and Travis gave us a laughably cheap quote, to move the fence when the county gets bored. Jackie's recorder sits on her dashboard, and we pretend we don't look at it when we drive by Hillview in daylight. Sometimes I stand by the gate in the heat of a noon that has no business being that hot, and I look at the stake with my name on it. I've made peace with the words. Date pending isn't a curse, it's a fact. It will be for all of us one day or another. Hillview is full of facts, lined up in rows. The stake doesn't scare me the way it did, though I won't lie. There are nights when I wake and feel dirt on my tongue and hear a rope creak and wonder what piece of me the earth will keep. On evenings when it finally rains, the scent off the ground by the angel is different from the rest of the cemetery. It smells like a cellar you forgot you had. It smells like work done right in the dark. When the lightning rolls down the highway, like a tired parade and the sky turns the color of tea. If you close your eyes, you can hear men breathing together. You can hear the scrape and the lift. You can hear the old gravedigger keeping his promise to a line everybody else forgot. The other night, while I was closing up, a teenager with a skateboard and too much cologne asked me if the place was haunted. I told him no. I told him to be respectful, to keep his wheels on the path and his hands off the stones. I told him the dead don't bother you if you don't bother them. He laughed and rolled away toward the gate, and for half a second his wheels hit a patch of soft dirt and sang down a note like a saw blade. He looked back at me, eyes wide, and said, "Did you hear that?" "Keep your feet," I told him, and that made him roll faster. Sometimes after midnight, when the cicadas pause and the highway breathes and the heat lets go just enough to remember a different season, the sound comes back in the distance. Not close, not threatening. The careful, tired rhythm of a man who knows his job and doesn't need anybody to say he's doing it right. Bite, step, lift. The shovel and the grunt. The work that keeps our lines where they belong. If you come by Hillview and you see a little canvas flag near the gate with my name on it, don't touch it. It isn't a prank. It isn't an invitation. It's a note from the ground that says I heard the rules and I'll do my best. We owe each other that much. We owe the dead their corners and their quiet. We owe the living a fence that doesn't lie. I still don't keep crystals in my truck. I still don't think every cold spot means company. But when I lock the gate and point my headlights down the farm road, I wait one extra second before I turn the wheel. I listen for the bite of a shovel. Sometimes I hear it. Sometimes I don't. Either way, I keep my feet where the line is. And if the night breathes like a lung and the dirt shifts under the weight of a box you and I can't see, I nod to the dark and let the work go on. I checked the bell out of my kitchen drawer and took it with me to the library like it was a library book and I owed late fees. I didn't plan anything smart. I just didn't want to walk through that bright, clean building with empty hands. I found the same table as before and laid the little brass bell on the wood as if I were putting down a drink I didn't want to spill. Coates noticed. She didn't say anything, just set down the new folder she'd pulled. A thin manila one, tied shut with white string. The label said St. Mary's, post-fire. She untied it and slid me a stack of copies. On top was a typed notice to parents from 2000, no evening visits inside the church fence. If you need to pay respects, please come during daylight. Then a small paragraph. We understand some children are lingering at dusk near the yard. Please encourage them to go home when they hear the bells from town. I had to read that 3 times. There were no bells from town anymore, not for St. Mary's anyway. Whose idea was that? I asked. Father Mallory's, Coates said. He was trying to replace the routine. Kids need markers to leave. He figured any bell would do. She tapped the page. Did it help? I don't know, I said, and tucked the copies into my backpack like I was taking evidence home. Do you know if any teachers from St. Mary's are still alive? From before the fire, I mean, Coates thought. Sister Agnes moved to the Carmel home years ago. If she's still with us, she'd be the one to ask. She was a force. She paused. If you go, be respectful. She doesn't owe you answers. I know, I said. I said it like a promise to someone listening who wasn't Coates. The Carmel home sat 2 blocks from the hospital. A low building with wide windows and a white cross out front. I stopped at a grocery on the way and bought flowers that looked sturdy enough to survive a car seat. The woman at the desk in the lobby checked a list with a pencil and said, "She's awake, short visits." Sister Agnes was smaller than I expected and looked like every tough teacher you've ever had. Sharp eyes, neat hair, a presence that made your spine straighten even if your real school days were decades behind you. She wore a cardigan the color of a robin's egg and had a plastic cup of ice water with a straw beside her elbow. Her hands were thin and spotted and still. When she saw the flowers, she smiled the way a person does when you bring them something they didn't ask for but appreciate anyway. "I'm not Catholic," I said, because I felt like that mattered. "But I grew up with your bell, St. Mary's." I set the bell on my knee so she could see it. "I wanted to ask about your rules." She looked at the bell and then at my face, and there was the smallest shadow of a nod, like she'd been waiting for this conversation since before I was born. "We had rules," she said. "We had to. Children wander so easily. They drift. If you don't give them a shape to stand in." "The triple bell after the hour," I said. "Dismissal." She smiled again, tired and pleased that I'd done some homework. "Dismissal came after attention," she said. "First you gather, eyes on me, hands to yourself, line up. Then you dismiss." She glanced at the bell again. "Do you hear it?" "Sometimes," I said. "At home and at the old yard." She folded her fingers like prayer and looked past me. Not at the window, just toward the memory of something brighter. "Children don't like leaving when the game is good," she said softly. "They ask for 5 more minutes until it's too dark to see." She paused. "We kept them with bells." "How?" I asked. "How do you keep them after they—" Her eyes flicked to mine with a warning in them a child would recognize from the back row. "We don't say that here," she said. "We say what helps. Hands to yourself. Don't cross the line. We'll play again tomorrow." Those are the sentences that keep a room from flying apart. "I don't want to hurt them," I said, and the fact that I had to say it out loud made my voice go thin. "No," she said. "Of course not." She took a careful sip from the straw and then, like a teacher throwing you a rope to grab, added, "If you hear the bell and you must answer, do it as if your mother told you to watch. The younger ones. Don't mock. Don't beg. And don't promise anything you won't keep." "What if they want me to stay?" I asked. Her mouth softened in a way that made me think she had loved a lot of kids who didn't get to grow up. "They all want you to stay," she said. "Even the ones ready to go home. That's why you ring the bell." She closed her eyes for a long blink and then opened them again. "Tell them the truth. The game is over for now. They can hate it. You don't change the rule." I didn't know what I expected to get from her. A prayer, maybe. A ritual. A map. Instead, I got the same thing I'd always gotten from adults who knew what they were doing. A handful of simple sentences and the weight of using them right. "Thank you," I said. "Bring nothing you can't lose," she added, and let her eyes drift to the bell again. "And don't ring that in here." "I won't," I said. When I left, a kid in a red hoodie was sitting on the curb outside the entrance, picking at the rubber toe of his shoe. He couldn't have been more than 8. He had a face that would, if all went well, turn into a strong one in a decade. A serious brow, a nick on his chin, eyes that noticed everything. He looked up at me, then at the bell under my arm. "Can I see?" he asked. His mother stood a few feet away talking to someone on the phone, her back turned, her hand making those tired little circles mothers make when they've been on hold too long. I crouched and let him look, not touch. "It's just a little bell," I said. He grinned. "We have a big one at school." "You do?" I said. "Do they ring it 3 times after the hour to let you go?" He thought. "No," he said, and then added as if he'd been told recently, "Don't talk to strangers." "Good rule," I said. He nodded like I'd passed a test. "Bye," he said, and I went. I should have gone home and shut the door and turned on the TV and let city noise fill all the spaces. I drove to Marco's instead. The shop smelled like rubber and heat. He had the bay door up and a car on the lift and a country song stuck between stations playing through a speaker with a frayed wire. He waved me in and ducked under the bumper. Chalk dust coated the lip of his workbench like powdered sugar. He didn't look at it. He never does. "She said they want you to stay," I told him. "You don't promise, you ring the bell, you tell the truth, that's it." He pulled his headlamp up onto his forehead and wiped his hands. "That it?" he said, half laughing. Just fix it with honesty and a jingle? She said, bring. Nothing you can't lose, I said. He looked at the bell under my arm and then at me. You gonna lose that? He asked. I didn't answer because I didn't know. That night at 8:13, 9:13, 10:13, the bell tone came like someone touching the rim of a glass. I didn't wait for 11:13. I took the bell, stepped into my apartment hallway, and stood in my own doorway with my feet on the line where the threshold would be if I had one. My upstairs neighbor laughed at something on a sitcom and then sneezed. I heard the building settle. I rang the bell once and waited the count Sister Agnes would have expected. I rang it again. I rang it the third time. The air didn't change. Dramatically, it never does. But there was a shift, a little one, like being noticed by a room. I kept my eyes up and my hands quiet. Line up, I said, steady. Hands to yourself. We're walking to the door. A hush came and went like a wave over carpet. In it, a softer noise, the shuffle you hear in a school hallway when coats hit shoulders. I didn't see shapes. I didn't want to. I felt a small hand on my sleeve again. A quick check-in. A kid's way of saying I'm here without the words, because words make things real you don't want to make real. I stood very still. You have a home? I said. You know it better than I do. The game is done for now. We'll play again when the bell rings. Something moved at my ankles. A brush like yarn passing skin. Then a step I didn't take. No, that's not right. A step taken next to me, matched to mine like someone learning how to leave again. The line on my hallway carpet that had appeared 3 nights in a row wasn't visible now. I pretended it was. I stepped over where it would be. The cold lifted. No voices, no humming. Just that quiet content shift a school makes when the last coat is on and someone has opened the door to the outside air. I closed the apartment door and leaned my forehead against the wood until it felt like something solid under me again. The little bell warmed in my hand like I'd held it too tight. For a few weeks, that was the rhythm. 8:13, 9:13, 10:13. Sometimes, a brush at 2:13 if I'd forgotten to set the bell on the table. The triple ring when I decided the day could be over. The same sentences said calmly. I didn't try to be important. I tried to be useful. If you've ever chaperoned a field trip, you know the feeling. You don't get applause when you bring 20 kids back to a bus. You get a headache and the relief of a count that lands where it should. I stopped finding chalk lines on my floor. The little gifts in my pockets thinned. No more green beads, no paperclip fish. Only a sticker now and then, like someone's last attempt to test me. I let myself think we'd struck a balance. Then, someone else broke the rules. Ruiz called me on a Tuesday at dusk. I could hear wind on his end and the squawk of his radio trying to chew on static. You need to come out, he said. Don't argue. What is it? I asked. Lights, he said. And kids. Real ones. I drove faster than I wanted and slower than my heart demanded. The road to St. Mary's looked like it always does, flat until it climbs, ordinary until it's not. I saw the glow before the gate, the kind of light battery lanterns. Make. I saw a cluster of silhouettes, teens by their posture, 5 or 6, jittery, too loud for the space. 2 trucks idled by the ditch, music thumping low the way older boys keep it when they want to look like they don't care. One of the lanterns sat on the stone where the door had been, and I winced like someone had put a hand on a bruise. Ruiz stood near the gate with his arms folded. He wasn't in uniform. He didn't need to be. The kids kept glancing at him like he was a fence they didn't want to climb even if they could. One boy held a spray paint can. The cap was off. A girl had her phone out filming. Evening, Ruiz said to me like this was regular. Our scholars here are trying to make content. We're not hurting anything, the girl said, not quite sullen, not quite polite. It's just nothing. The smallest boy, he couldn't have been more than 12, stood a little apart from the others. He wasn't holding a phone. He held a small car, a cheap die-cast painted red and chipped at the edges. He was staring through the fence with the serious concentration of someone trying to hear a quiet voice in a loud room. You shouldn't be inside the fence, I said like a tired chaperone. This is a cemetery, you can film the gate. Relax, the spray can kid said, and shook the can. The ball rattled inside, bright and ugly. We're tagging the wall and bouncing. You'll wake them, Rui said, too mild for the words. And they hate being woken. We? The girl said, smirking. Who's we? There's a tone people adopt when they're about to make themselves the main story. You hear it in bars right before a fight. You hear it in classrooms right before a kid throws a desk. The smallest boy didn't have that tone. He stepped forward, with the car in his hand, and reached for the gate like it was a hinge he meant to test. Don't, I said without thinking. My voice surprised him. He looked at me, then at the bell under my arm, then back. He wasn't scared. He was paying attention. What is that? He asked. A teacher bell? Something like that, I said. What's your name? He glanced at the older kids like the answer might get him in trouble. Gabe, he said. Gabe, I said. You came to bring that car? He looked at the car like he'd forgotten it was there. My brother had one, he said. It was blue. He squinted at the stones the way you do when you're trying to match the feel of something to the shape of it. Mom said not to. Come, I'm not inside. I'm just looking. You don't have to go in to leave something, I said. Sometimes you just put it at the line, and the right hands get it. The spray can hissed. The boy with it had pointed it at the low wall and drawn a quick, dirty spiral. Not big, but loud in the way the kind of mark is loud here. The sound made something behind the gate prick up. You don't hear it with your ears. You feel it. The air tightens like a classroom when the substitute says the wrong name and someone decides this is going to be fun. Hey, Ruiz said. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. Cap it. Why? The boy said, the grin already too big. You think ghosts care about Krylon? No, Ruiz said. I care. The boy rolled his eyes and popped the cap on with a click. The girl filming chuckled and framed him like a hero anyway. Back up, I said. And I said it the way Sister Agnes would have, with the weight at the front of the sentence, not at the end. The girl didn't move. The smallest boy did. Something in him recognized the tone. He put the car gently on the stone just inside the gate and took one step back so carefully it broke my heart. I set the bell on the stone where the door had been and picked it up and rang it once. The kids laughed like I'd honked a clown horn. I rang it again. The spray can boy pointed at me and said, "Yo, he's summoning them." And his voice cracked on them and it made him angry enough to double down. I rang it the third time. The bell sound went out into the old yard with that small, neat circle. The air answered. The chalk circle a few feet inside the fence darkened just a shade like a fingertip had traced it. The lantern light flickered through the breeze didn't touch our hair. The girl's phone jittered as her hands betrayed her, and she steadied them with a breath. "Line up," I said, and followed it with, "Hands to yourself. We're walking to the door." Silence. No giggles this time. No hum. Just the pressure of attention, like 100 bright eyes behind the dark. Somewhere near the lamb-topped stone, something set down a marble. It tapped once. It doesn't sound like anything scary when you explain it later. That tap will stay with me as long as anything. The smallest boy said very softly, "Do I say present?" "You can," I said. "Present," he whispered. The spray can kid laughed too loud. "Okay, Grandpa," he said. He shoulder bumped the smallest boy hard the way older boys do to make a point. The kid's shoe skidded and crossed the chalk dust at the very edge of the outer line, the thin one that rings the stone floor outside the fence. It wasn't inside the yard. It was still a line. The dust smeared. Something in the dark answered with a leap. I didn't see a face. Don't ask me for a face. Ask me for a... I saw the lantern flame flick sideways as if blown hard by a mouth the size of a child's head, the light bowing and then righting itself. The spray can kid took a sudden step backward he didn't plan and looked offended at his own calves. The smallest boy froze like someone had called it. His eyes were on the gate. All the childish bravado fell out of the older boys at once, leaving them human for a second. You could see the math on their faces. We are small, we made a noise, something heard. Back up, Ruiz said again, deeper this time. The kind of sentence a person disobeys only if they haven't learned what consequence feels like yet. The girl lowered her phone an inch and then lifted it again by reflex. We're fine, she said to nobody filming. I kept my eyes on the gate. Dismissal, I said. The game is over for now. Bells have rung. Walked to the door. A breath. Went through the old yard, a long one in and out like something trying to decide if it would follow my rules or its own. The chalk circle inside the fence brightened faintly again and then went pale like a pulse you can't quite catch. I didn't know which way we had tipped. The smallest boy saved us. He bowed his head the way kids used to when grown-ups were, watching and said not to me and not to Ruiz, just into the yard. I'll come back tomorrow after school with a blue car like his. I'll put it at the line. I'm going to go home right now. There was a crack of sound that wasn't a branch. The lantern on the stone tilted and then settled as if someone had bumped it gently with a hip like you do when you move through a crowded hallway. That same soft marble tap came from the far side of the circle. Then the shift, the one we'd been waiting for, the uncoiling of attention, the release that isn't a door opening so much as a class-breaking rank. Walk, I said quietly, and for once every kid there listened at once, even the ones with facial hair. They backed up. The girl kept filming, but she did it while moving, her voice a whisper now, the smirk gone. The spray can kid capped his can twice like the second cap would make it safer. The smallest boy looked at the red car on the stone as if it were a hand. He was leaving behind and then looked at me. I nodded. Ruiz nodded. We all breathed. Somewhere beyond the live oaks, a night bird made a short, irritated sound like it had been woken on the wrong part of the branch. I hate the part of me that wants to make this clean. It wasn't. The older kids laughed at themselves 2 minutes later and made jokes too loud, the way kids do to pack the scary part into something bite-sized. They drove away with music up, and the relief on their faces looked a lot like pride by the time taillights hit the bend. The smallest boy stayed. He stood with his hands in his hoodie pocket and looked at the gate like a kid outside a classroom. He's not sure it's his anymore. You don't have to come back, I told him. He shrugged. I promised. Don't promise them anything, Ruiz said gentle. Promise your mom? She'll be mad, the boy said. That's okay, Ruiz said. Moms are allowed. The boy smiled a little at that and then trotted down the slope with small, careful steps. He looked back once and gave us that awkward wave boys give when they're trying to be cool but also polite. We waved back. Sometimes decency is the only spell you've got. Ruiz waited until the road sound faded. Then he sat on the low wall and put his face in his hands. It wasn't dramatic. It was tired. I need to stop coming here at night, he said into his palms. You keep coming to keep the rest of us honest, I said. You keep coming to keep the rules, he said. He looked up. You know that's what you are now, right? Not a priest, not a cop, a bell. I don't want to be anything, I said. It sounded petulant. It was true. He nodded like that answer counted. Sister Agnes still living? She is, I said. She told me not to bring anything I can't lose. You should listen to her, he said. We left the lantern where it was. We didn't like the idea of carrying it off while the yard watched. We backed away without haste and drove in silence to the gas station bright enough to make our eyes water. We drank burnt coffee and didn't talk about the fact that I could smell chalk on my hands even though I hadn't touched any. For a while after that, the nights were quiet again. The bell still sang its thin little rings at 8:13, 9:13, 10:13, but there were fewer brushes at 2:13, fewer small kindnesses left where I would find them. The chalk lines stopped showing up at my door. The hopscotch on Marco's sidewalk faded under foot traffic and rain and didn't redraw itself for a week. Then the list started. The first time it was on my doormat, folded once. The crease careful. Inside, names in block letters and check, boxes like a teacher taking attendance. I recognized some, old ledger names, the little boy with the cowlick. Some were new. At the bottom, my mother's nickname for me again, checked. 2 lines down, a new name, Gabe. No last initial, no check. A little empty square. I stood in the hall for too long holding it. I sent Ruiz a picture. He texted back, "On my way, then don't move it." He arrived out of breath, hands on his hips like he'd run the stairs 2 at a time. He looked at the names and didn't say anything for a long minute. "They're keeping better books than we are," he said finally. "That's almost funny." "What does an empty box mean?" I asked. "Absent," he said. I pictured the small boy with the red car and felt a brittle heat behind my eyes I hate admitting to. "He said he'd come," I said. "He shouldn't have. He's a kid." "He said he would." "Let's go ask his mother if she knows where he is instead of chewing our own tongues," Ruiz said. We found Gabe 2 blocks from his house, sitting on a curb with a blue car in his pocket, scuffing the toe of his shoe over a line of ants, like he decided not to bother them. His mother was on the porch talking too loudly on the phone to someone she needed to sound okay for. When she saw us, she hung up and wiped her hand on her jeans and called his name in that way that mixes love and grievance. He came. She made all the polite noises you make to a deputy and a stranger who care. She had the eyes of a person who hasn't slept right since an ambulance light burned her retinas once for hours. "We're not in trouble?" Gabe asked Ruiz when his mother went inside for a second. "Not with me," Ruiz said. "With your mother, maybe." Gabe looked at me. "I didn't go back," he said. "I wanted to. I forgot the car, then I remembered, then it got dark." "That's okay," I said. "That's right." He looked down at the car in his pocket like it had a say. "Can I go tomorrow? In the afternoon?" "You can bring it to the fence in daylight," Ruiz said. "You can put it at the line, you can go home, that's all." Gabe nodded, the tiny relieved smile of a kid who gets to follow a rule because someone gave him one. "Okay," he said. I thought if I don't bring it, they'll be mad." "They get mad," I said. "They don't stay mad." "And if they do," Ruiz added, "they have to go through me." That made Gabe's smile real. He did that boy salute, 2 fingers to his temple, and jogged inside. We watched him show his mother the blue car like a trophy. She laughed, a little winded sound, and said something too fast and hugged him the way you hug a kid who has frightened you without knowing it. That night, the list on my doormat had a new mark. Next to Gabe, a check. I didn't know if I was relieved or if we'd just set up another rule I didn't understand. I folded the paper and put it in the Ziploc with the first list and told myself I wasn't keeping relics. I was keeping records, which is the same lie museums tell when they house the bones of saints. The next weeks turned into a routine I couldn't explain to anyone without hearing how it sounded in my own mouth. Work, dishes, the bell at the right times, occasional trips to the church fence in daylight with a marble bag or a toy car. Sometimes there were new chalk drawings, stars, hopscotch, a stick figure with a crown. Sometimes there were fresh flowers. Sometimes the gate was left open a fraction of an inch and I closed it with 2 fingers like you stroke the side of a nervous animal. Then one evening in early April, when the warm wind had that sticky early summer feel and the oak pollen painted everything pale, the bell didn't ring at 8:13. It didn't ring at 9:13. At 10:13 the air went cold and the little brass bell on my table gave a tiny cough of a sound and went still. I waited. I rang it myself once, twice, 3 times. The sound fell flat like I'd rung it inside a drawer. I said the sentences anyway. Line up. Hands to yourself. We're walking to the door. The apartment was only an apartment again. I slept badly. Dreams running fast. Every door in them a rectangle of darker dark. In the morning there was a list on my doormat with no names. Just boxes. 40 of them. Empty. At the bottom, a note in crooked block letters that said, "Bell won't." Under it, smaller, "Teacher gone." I don't like the word panic because people use it for situations that don't deserve it. This did. I took the list to Ruiz's and he rubbed the heel of his hand over his eyes and said, "Okay," very quietly, in a way that meant nothing about this was okay. We went to the Carmel home. Sister Agnes was asleep in a bright patch of morning. I didn't want to wake her, but I didn't have a better adult to ask. When she opened her eyes and saw the paper, She made a sound like a sip of air that doesn't get all the way in. "Who wrote this?" she asked. "I think they did," I said. "I think they don't have—" I didn't say the word teacher. It felt too mean to aim at a person whose voice had held 100 small souls steady. "We get tired," she said, gentle and apologetic to someone who wasn't me. "We all have to sit down sometimes." She looked from the list to the bell like she could see how it had failed before I could tell her. "It's not about the bell," she said. "The bell was never the power. It was the agreement. How do we keep it?" I asked. "You don't," she said, and put her hand on mine the way teachers do when they need you to understand a thing with your skin as well as your head. "You offer it. You hold it up. You say it like you mean it. If you do it long enough, sometimes the world remembers. What if it doesn't? Then you keep saying it," she said. "Someone else is listening." I stayed in her little room for an extra minute after that because it felt like leaving would take more of her energy to hold the day. On my way out, I ran into Coates coming in with a paper bag. She lifted it so I could see the top, a loaf, of something wrapped in wax paper. "She likes lemon," she said softly. "She pretends the nurses made it." "Do they?" I asked. "No," Coates said. "She doesn't like to be thanked." I needed to be somewhere I could tell the truth out loud, so I went to Marco's and said the bell had gone silent, and the lists were empty, and teachers get tired, and I didn't know what to do. He put a hand on the back of his neck and stared at the floor and then at his hands and then at me like he was choosing which of his tools to swing at this problem. "I'll sit with you," he said. "Where?" I asked. "Everywhere," he said, but he meant the church. We took 2 chairs and 2 thermoses and a bag of marbles, and we went at dusk. We did not bring lanterns. We didn't bring our jokes. We sat at the old door, and we waited. The world went from blue to black around us. The little bell on my knee was just wait. We listened to every animal in the county take a turn at being the loudest. At 9:13, nothing. At 10:13, nothing. At 11:13, a sound like a breath pulled in through teeth. It didn't come from the bell. It came from the yard. "Line up," I said, into the dark. "Hands to yourself." Something small ran across the stone floor behind us. Feet fast and flat, a patter like rain. Marco flinched. I held my ground. "We're walking to the door," I said. "We know the rules." A voice, not a child's and not a grown-up's exactly, answered from inside the fence. It sounded like 2 voices from different ends of a hallway trying to say the same thing at once. "We know," it said, and I wanted to weep in relief, and didn't. The bell didn't ring and didn't need to. They knew the shape. It was still here. Teachers get tired. The rules sit on the stones and wait for someone to pick them up. We didn't win anything that night. Holding a line isn't winning. It's just making space where other things can happen that aren't terrible. We sat until the air warmed a little, and the pressure of being watched shifted into the softer pressure of being remembered. We left marbles at the line and left like men leaving a sleeping house, careful on the steps, keys quiet. The lists came back on my doormat, names again, checked and unchecked, an unsteady roll in a hand that changed day to day. Sometimes there were extra boxes with no names. I didn't like those. They felt like seats empty in a classroom where kids had gotten taller, faster than we were ready for. Sometimes the bell didn't ring, and we went anyway. And I said the sentences the way Sister Agnes taught them to me with her eyes. "Line up. Hands to yourself. We're walking to the door." Sometimes nothing answered, and I felt like a fool and went home with cold hands. Sometimes a laugh ran along the low stones like a ribbon, and a marble clicked once and something brushed my sleeve, and the chalk circle darkened and went pale, and I could breathe again. Gabe brought the blue car one afternoon and set it at the line and said out loud, "I am bringing you this," the way good kids hand their homework over, and he backed up with his hands in his pockets like we had told him, and didn't look back until he hit the road. He sleeps, his mother says, better now because he has a thing he can do that feels like doing, which is what most of us want. Marco still draws a hopscotch grid on his sidewalk sometimes without remembering. He says it's his handwriting now. He laughs. He checks the back door of the shop and leaves the light on in the bay because there's always one kid who needs one more pass around the circle before they can go. Ruiz says less than he used to and stands at the gate more. He doesn't shoo teenagers away. He just watches them the way you watch kids get close to water. They feel it. Even the loud ones lower their voices. One girl left her phone at the line and then changed her mind and took it back with a sudden swallow of panic, like she'd almost put her hand on a hot stove. She says she dreamed of a corridor of lockers that night, endless and humming, the light green and flickering. I moved my couch back to where it belongs and put the bell on the shelf by the window and told myself it can watch the street now and I don't have to carry it. It finds its way to the coffee table sometimes. I let it. I don't trap it in drawers anymore. I don't pretend nothing is happening. I'm past that. Every so often I drive by St. Mary's at dusk and see nothing. Just a ruin, just a fence, just a few small headstones that look like lost teeth in tall grass. That's how it should be. If you get spectacle, you get tourists. If you get tourists, you get paint and shouting. They want a show. This isn't a show. It's attendance. It's saying present when the world calls your name. It's a bell you ring 3 times, not because it's magic, but because you promised you would. Last week I dreamed I stood in the doorway of a classroom with the late light making a rectangle on the floor, and for once the room wasn't empty. It was full in that quiet way rooms are when coats are zipped and voices stay soft because a teacher is watching. I couldn't see her. I felt her. The kids looked at me like I was a clock they were checking. I held up the bell and didn't ring. I just stood there and waited for the minute hand to click. I woke up with my hands folded and my mouth saying, "Hands to yourself," like a prayer. If you ever go to St. Mary's, go in daylight. Put the toys at the line. Don't film without thinking about who you're asking to perform. Don't spray your name on their wall. It doesn't belong there. If you hear the laughter from the road at night, keep driving. And if the bell comes to your house the way it came to mine, don't bargain. Don't plead. Just say the rules that kept you alive when you were small. Hold your ground in the doorway until you feel the room let go. Sometimes on the lists that show up on my mat, there's a name I don't know and a box checked in a hand I do. Sometimes, rarely, there's a name I do know and no check. Those nights I put the bell on the table and sit up and wait at 2:13 with the lamp off. I don't call. I don't coax. I leave the door on its latch and my feet on the threshold and say quietly, so quietly I could almost be thinking it, "Line up, hands to yourself, we're walking to the door." When the air changes, when the room relaxes like a child who has finally let go of a game, I count to 10 the way Sister Agnes taught me in a room she may never physically enter again, and I sleep. You want something bigger than that. Some answer that knots everything up. I don't have it. I have a bell I sometimes wish I'd never picked up and a set of sentences that keep finding their way into my mouth when people I love are tired or drunk or angry or sad. Come back to me. Hands to yourself. We are going to the door. I say it to my sister on the phone when she cries about nothing in Houston and says her apartment smells like onions and rainy wool and she misses our mother so much it makes her teeth hurt. I say it to Marco when he stands too long staring at a tire like sleep might come if he waits for it. And I bump his shoulder and tell him to clock out. I say it to myself when I want to sit on the curb outside my place and count the ants instead of going inside where the quiet accumulates. I haven't heard Sister Agnes's voice in months. I don't ask Coates for updates because I'm afraid. The last time I brought lemon bread, Coates met me at the door and said, "She's sleeping." And I said, "Okay," and left it on a table with 4 other loaves wrapped in wax paper. Teachers gather offerings even after they've set the chalk down. The world owes them so much we can't pay. We work it off in little circles and simple sentences, and the knowledge that there will always be a line we don't cross, not because someone says no, but because someone loved us enough to give us a rule we could hold on to when we would otherwise drift. One night I came home late from a job in a building with too much glass and not enough air, and found a marble on my kitchen counter. It was green, with a swirl of pale like smoke inside. I picked it up and rolled it along my palm and felt for half a second the exact weight of a small hand in mine from a place I can't name. I wanted to put it at the door and wait. I put it in a bowl with keys and quarters instead and went to bed. I woke at 2:13, of course, to the ring you could call nothing if you needed to. I lay there and counted to 10 and said the sentences. The air warmed a degree. The building sighed. Somewhere in the hall, a pipe clicked. I slept. I woke again at 5:12 to the light that turns the city gray and honest and found the marble on the floor by the door, as if it had rolled toward it in the night and stopped at the line I couldn't see. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I do. I stand in the doorway when I'm asked. I don't bargain. I don't make speeches. I keep my hands still. I ring the bell when the minutes say it's time. I let go when the room does. I try not to carry anything I can't lose, and I fail at that a lot, and I forgive myself when I do. If you need a better ending than that, you won't get it from me. I could give you a ghost that shows itself and a priest who lays it to rest, and a town that sleeps clear forever after. That's a movie. What we have is a ruin, and chalk lines, and tiny headstones with lambs on them, and a laughter that is not cruel and not kind. Just here. We have a teacher's hand hovering in the air pointed at the door. We have a list on a doormat with names you can't quite read and boxes you check even when you don't know why you're checking them. Present. I write at the bottom sometimes, because that's the only word that still feels like it holds anything. Present as in here. Present as in a gift. Present as in the only time you actually live in. Then I fold the paper and put it with the others and tell myself I'll throw them out one day. I won't. I am not good at letting go. I am good at steps, one after another, to a door I can't see, saying the lines that keep the world polite. And in one piece for one more recess bell. That's the truest thing I can give you. Not closure, not courage even. Just the knowledge that on any night if you listen in certain places you will hear kids playing in the dark like they always have. And if you stand where a doorway used to be and you hold your ground and speak, the grammar of order into the hum, something will listen and something will go home, and you'll never really know whether the difference you made was big or small. You'll only know that it was your turn and you were present, and when the bell rang, you didn't pretend you didn't hear it.